Hey everybody, welcome to the Be Weird broadcast. We got ourselves quite a show lined up for you today. Happy to have you with us. How are you all doing? It's a lovely day here in Montreal. Another morning starting off with a bright blue sky. And we're gonna watch the House Select Committee do the second day of its impeachment hearings. And I'm very excited to see what they have in store for us. I'm going to be pulling up some news just to kind of like get us in the headspace, kind of see what's developed over the weekend, what's some of the commentary been, and then by that point we'll head to the live session in 45 minutes. So I'm blasting off. All right, another Be Weird broadcast. Let's go. Hope you're having a good day. I got all sorts of writing and homework and things to do. And yeah, I saw an incredible play over the weekend that I'm still really pumped about. Good morning, Stool Chief. How you doing? Been trying to blow up on the TikTok, on the tactic. And yeah, I'm looking forward to this. I mean, the news yesterday was even kind of crazy with all those guys in the U-Haul that were picked up. Oh my goodness. So we'll take another look at that. There's been some news. They've all been unmasked. I think they all look kind of funny. So we're going to poke some fun at some fascists, which is what you should do when you get the chance. And yeah, it should be fun. Should be a good start. And then we'll cut to January 6th stuff and it'll all flow from there. All right, let's get into it. How do you like the new intro music? Is it nice and chill? How about them chill vibes? Okay, all right. This article is from the Spokesman Review from Spokane, Washington, which has been around since 1883. Wow, that's actually pretty cool. Sheriff's Office releases names of the 31 Patriot Front members arrested in the Saturday bust. So, yeah, let's take a look at these goofballs, shall we? Okay. Some haircut. I don't think he's got the bangs exactly right. Bangs are supposed to be even, I'm pretty sure. Woo! That's an Aryan boy, if I ever seen one. Okay. He looks like he was talked into it. He goes with the way of the crowd. Oh, hello. Hey, dude. What's going on there? Okay. Looks a little shaggy, I guess. Bro, what is there something off? Am I the only one thinking there's something off with the way these people look? Okay, he looks kind of normal, but dull, maybe? Alright, he looks like maybe he runs a maple syrup farm. I don't know. That boy don't look right. Okay, that's a grown-up child. That look is a little bizarre. Okay. He looks a little young to have that look. Oh my goodness, he's like a 40-year-old in a 20-year-old body. Okay, that guy's super young. He looks otherwise normal though. Okay. Alright. They are not sending their best. They are definitely not sending their best. Oh, we're only halfway through? Okay. Okay, that guy looks like he built a cabin with his hands. Oh boy. He's got an odd look about him too. Also, what's with the eye? Like, you notice they got like this odd eye thing going on? I don't know, man. What a pouty look. He looks like he loves soccer. Plays it with his mates every weekend. That boy don't look right. Okay, something's up. Something's up. Oh my god, something's up. Okay, I can't deal. Why do they all have this odd look about them? That's what I can't really suss out. Yeah, like, come on. Half of these boys look like they're just regular fellows, maybe with some shabby haircuts. And then the other half look bizarre. Just kind of off. I don't know what it is, though. Like, oh, I don't know. Like, what the fuck? They're all sharing some common traits, but I don't know what those traits are. Right? Right? Like, look at these two guys. It's the weird eyes? Yeah, something's up. Oh, something's definitely up. I don't know. Something's up with these boys. You look at these 4 in a row. Okay. Oh, this gives me gives me some weird vibes, man. Oh, this guy's got such a scary look in his eyes. Ah, he's got the like Machiavellian beard, the mustache, I should say, the Machiavellian mustache. Oh my goodness. Okay, all right. This is a bit unusual. These guys look like spare parts. Who are these people? So these are the 31 Patriot Front members who were arrested in a Saturday bust. If you haven't seen that, I'm sorry, I'll fill you in real quick. So a U-Haul was driving in Gare d'Alene, Idaho, and was stopped. I'm just gonna kill the music for a sec. This U-Haul was stopped. I got the exact moment. I clipped it and shipped it. Let me see. I'm just gonna pull it up real quick. Okay, so this is the exact moment they get stopped. Oh, you can't hear the music. Do it again. Oh, you saw it yesterday? Oh, man. Okay. Oh, jeez. Yeah. I mean, jeez. It's so good. It's so funny. So this is what they look like. They've all been unmasked, and that's what we were going through. Each of their faces, and there's something up. Something bizarre, especially this string of gentlemen. Okay, reading on. And here is the actual context. What is happening? I don't know what's happening. It's only going to get worse from here. Yeah, spare parts for sure. In other comments, I don't know if this is my view. Like, I don't know if I totally agree, but some people were alleging that it's like fetal alcohol syndrome. Maybe like that's what they all share. Like, I don't know if I can go that hard, but shit. All right, all 31 members of a white nationalist group arrested on suspicion of conspiring to riot in Gare d'Alene during a pride event had bonded out of the Kootenai County Jail as of Sunday afternoon. So they posted bond. The Kootenai County Sheriff's Office released the names and photos of all suspects on Sunday, a day after the Gare d'Alene police chief said the Patriot Front members were en route to the Pride in the Park event with riot gear, a smoke grenade, and paperwork police say resembled an operations plan. Patriot Front is a white nationalist group with branches across the country that specializes in vandalism, racist propaganda, and flash demonstrations meant to intimidate minorities, according to a report from the Anti-Defamation League. Ah, yes, homophobes. Yeah, they're, as we expected. The Patriot Front members were discovered packed inside of the back of a U-Haul moving truck after a concerned citizen tipped police off about what looked like a little army. I think I actually found some footage of them getting into conflict at the actual park. So if there's time, we'll dig into that before the January 6th session is in order. Thomas Rousseau, the group's founder, was among those arrested. Morning! How you doing, Loud Tyrant Mama? Yeah, absolutely. Like this one, January 6th, like it's popping off. Part of the reason I started this is because I knew America would go through some changes, let's say, and I wanted to be here for it. Also arrested were Kieran Morris, Garrett Garland, and Mitchell Wagner. all of whom were documented by the Southern Poverty Law Center and activist groups as active members of hate groups, according to an April report by the center. Yeah, should be good. Wagner, who is listed in court documents to be from Florissant, Missouri, although that's a French word that I would pronounce Florissant, but I'm pretty sure it's Florissant, Missouri, was charged with felony first-degree property damage after he was accused of defacing a Black History mural at Washington University in St. Louis in March, according to Southern Poverty Law Center. Man, they're really leaning hard on SPLC. That's funny. The sheriff's office said the men were from all across the country. So that's a quick update. There they are. Look at these goofballs. Look at these goofballs all piling into a U-Haul. Why did you think that was a good idea? What if there was a car accident? What do you think would have happened? You can't wear seatbelts when you're all standing like sardines in a sweaty U-Haul van. Okay, I'm done. All right. Let's move on. There is... I actually have quite a bit. We only got like half an hour before it starts. So yeah, let's start going through some of the backstory of January 6th, just to make sure we didn't miss anything. Thump, thump, thump. Like a bunch of bowling pins. Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea what was going through their heads. Not much,
and
apparently.
Battled law enforcement. On this point, there is no room for debate. Those who invaded our capital and battled law enforcement for hours were motivated by what President Trump had told them, that the election was stolen and that he was the rightful president. President Trump summoned the mob, assembled the mob, and lit the flame of this attack.
Okay, so that's the juicy soundbite. I have a primer for us. It's lip shit, but you know they do summaries very well. So here is, oh God, what's his name? Chris Hayes.
I'm Chris Hayes. The country is still processing the testimony from last night's inaugural.
Even though these are definitely advanced weapon systems, if you don't have a lot of them and a lot of rockets, they're just not going to make any difference on the strategic battlefield.
Bad website that I don't like. Okay, let's try
Good
this
evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. The country is still processing the
Matt Giberson, Stepien no longer appearing. Committee announces
testimony from last night's inaugural primetime hearing of the January 6th committee. And while we learned a lot last night, which we will take you through this hour, one major takeaway is something we've been repeating on this.
Let's pull that up right now because it's breaking. This is from KTLA, a local news source, it seems. Posted 6:20 this morning. We're going to pause on you. The start of the second public televised hearing of the House Select Committee investigating the January 6th attack on the Capitol has been delayed 30 minutes early Monday morning. Good to know. Good to know. I guess we do have time, everybody. Trump campaign manager Bill Stepien will no longer be among those testifying, citing a family emergency. Remember, we're all in the family here. Stepien was subpoenaed for his public testimony. Oh, as if he's going to try to weasel out of it. The next round of hearings won't take place in prime time like the debut Thursday, but lawmakers are expected to go into greater detail about specific aspects of the insurrection. Members of the committee said Sunday they had uncovered enough evidence for the Justice Department to consider an unprecedented criminal indictment against former President Donald motherfucking Trump. Representative Liz Cheney of Wyoming said lawmakers will present evidence Monday showing that Trump, quote, engaged in a massive effort to spread false and fraudulent information, end quote, that the election had been stolen, even though advisors and allies told him repeatedly he had lost. Yeah, that's news. That's news. Thank you for that. Welcome to the stream.
Show for more than a year, Donald Trump attempted a coup. That was the front page above the fold headline of the New York Times today, the newspaper of record. You could read a similar sentiment on front pages of papers across the country. The Washington Post went with panel pins blame on Trump. The Orlando Sentinel's front page reads, January 6 panel pins plot on Trump. The Colorado Springs Gazette went with panel points finger at Trump. Even in Red Alaska, the Anchorage Daily News implicitly blamed the ex-president with an arresting headline, again, quote, an attempted coup.
Nice.
We've known the contours of Donald Trump's coup attempt for some time.
I cannot believe it took the media like a year to get there. Holy cow.
We would get powerful new images from the insurrection itself, like the ones you are seeing on your screen right now. There was a sense of trepidation, I think partly born of what happened with the Mueller report, that after a year of leaks and countless tell-all books about the final days of the Trump administration, there might be just nothing left for the committee to reveal. Needless to say, that was not the case.
All the books are
coming out. In fact, people across the country tuned in huge, surprisingly huge numbers. At least 20 million people watched the 2-hour hearing last night. That's the Nielsen numbers. For context, that's on par with events like Sunday night football games or the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. That's big America watches kind of stuff.
But how about today? Is today going to have those numbers? No way, because it's like, what, a Monday morning? Everybody's going to be at work.
And the hearing also delivered in terms of what it broadcast. I mean, we on this show have been covering the insurrection, its aftermath, about as closely as anyone in the media. And there were still multiple brand new revelations last night that took us here on All In, our staff, by surprise.
That's what I'm hoping for. Give me new information. Let's like actually figure out what the how deep and far this went. I want to know why Chuck Grassley was ready to call the Senate into hearing, because he knew that Mike Pence wouldn't be there. He tweeted that out. I'm gonna see if I find that the day before.
Lacking the whole time. Is that new? Did we know that? Have we seen that before? There was the news that a Trump campaign lawyer named Alex Cannon told Chief of Staff Mark Meadows back in November, that Trump's claims of election fraud were bogus.
I remember a call with Mr. Meadows, where Mr. Meadows was asking me what I was finding and if I was finding anything. And I remember sharing with him that we weren't finding anything that would be sufficient to change the results in any of the key states.
Consciousness of guilt. If you got somebody saying, I definitely had this conversation with him, and you keep repeating that, like he knew that he lost, consciousness of guilt. He knew what he was doing.
When was that conversation?
Probably in November, mid to late November. I think it was before my child was born.
And what was Mr. Meadows' reaction to that information?
I believe the words he used were, so there's no there there.
There's no there there.
There's no there there.
Mid to late November from Mark Meadows. That is new. But knowing that fact did not stop Meadows from pushing Trump's big lie in public and in private for months as he helped enable the coup.
What's crazy, though, that what I find so hard to get my head around is that we have the language to describe it as the big lie, and yet still they're able to push their agenda forward. That's the part I don't understand. Like, didn't we learn anything? Like, how is this still working? Fuck.
Committee also revealed brand new testimony from Trump Attorney General Bill Barr and the president's own daughter Ivanka, who both said they did not believe that Trump won the election.
Amazing.
I made it clear I did not agree with the idea of saying the election was stolen and putting out this stuff, which I told the president was bullshit. And, I didn't want to be a part of it. You can't live in a world where the incumbent administration stays in power based on its view, unsupported by specific evidence, that there was fraud in the election.
Put that on a loop.
How did that affect your perspective about the election when Attorney General Barr made that statement?
It affected my perspective. I respect Attorney General Barr.
She looks so shell-shocked.
Accepted what he was saying.
Yeah, well, both those bits of testimony completely new. That was the daughter of the ex-president of the United States saying she agreed with Attorney Bill Barr that her daddy's claims of a stolen election were all BS.
Nice.
And today, on his weird off-brand social media website, Trump attacked Bill Barr and his own daughter, Ivanka. Quote, yes. Ivanka Trump was not involved in looking at or studying election results. She had long since checked out and was, in my opinion, only trying to be respectful to Bill Barr and his position as Attorney General, parentheses, he sucked.
He sucked.
Even though Attorney General Barr and Ivanka...
Man, I wish I could get on Truth Social. I tried, everybody. I tried, but they don't have it for Android, and I'm not buying an iPhone just to get onto his stupid social media platform.
Both knew the election was not stolen. We should keep in mind. They never used their platforms to forcefully say the election was free and fair. In fact, Barr's resignation letter in December 2020, in that letter, he endorsed the investigation into fraud he now admits was BS. Before last night, we had gotten contemporaneous reporting that Barr's own DOJ staff was concerned about Trump's coup attempt. But last night, the committee revealed exactly what Trump's son-in-law, Jared, thought of all the lawyers threatening to quit.
Oh, this is great.
Jared, are you aware of instances where Pat Cipollone threatened to resign?
I kind of, like I said, my interest at that time was on trying to get as many pardons done.
Get the pardons.
And I know that, he was always, him and the team were always saying,
like, this is a real Oprah moment. Like, and you get a pardon, and you get a pardon. Everybody gets a pardon.
oh, we're going to resign. We're not going to be here if this happens, if that happens. So I kind of took it up to just be whining, to be honest with you.
Oh, he's such a petulant little rich soy boy. Ugh.
Again, that was new. Jared Kushner just whining. Oh, there's a coup happening, and I tuned them all out. It's funny that Kushner mentions his work on pardons there, because another big revelation from tonight. Again, another one of those, wait a second, did we know that? We didn't know that. That was the multiple Republican congressmen, including coup plotter Scott Perry, Pennsylvania, who sought White House pardons for their role in trying to, well, we think, overthrow a free and fair election.
As you will see, Representative Perry contacted the White House in the weeks after January 6th to seek a presidential pardon. Multiple other Republican congressmen also sought presidential pardons for their roles in attempting to overturn the 2020 election.
Now, Perry said today that that was a lie. I think he called it a soulless lie. I mean, I guess we'll find out, right? I think we're going to get to the bottom of that. Now, I'm no lawyer, but it seems like you would probably only seek a pardon if you think you're going to be charged with a crime or did something wrong. Now, the committee did not just reveal brand new information. It also fleshed out previously reported incidents, like the meeting which precipitated the now infamous Trump tweet, where he invited supporters to a wild day in D.C. on January 6th.
I think every tweet, everything I put out for January 6th is going to have that tag. Will be wild.
On December 18th, 2020, a group, including General Michael Flynn, Sidney Powell, Rudy Giuliani, and others, visited the White House. They stayed late into the evening.
And I think, like, what's his name? The My Pillow guy, Mike Lindell, had the word, like, martial law and question marks. Like, he had it on a paper and somebody zoomed in and took a picture of it. Or it was, like, caught on film or something. And everybody's like, hey, Mike, what you doing with that?
We know that the group discussed a number of dramatic steps, including having the military seize voting machines and potentially rerun elections.
Yeah, and we watched Marjorie Taylor Greene try to play off like she couldn't remember discussing martial law. And, of course, it was spelt incorrectly. Big slap on the wrist.
We'll also hear that President Trump met with that group alone for a period of time before White House lawyers and other staff discovered the group was there and rushed to intervene.
I think there would be, like, actually big consequences from this, but not the ones we expect. It's going to be one of those, like, chaos theory things where it, like, doesn't totally play out. It's like they do criminally indict Trump, for instance, but then something fucky happens or it does go through and then, like, stuff really starts to fall apart. Like, I don't know. What's the worst they can do to Trump? It's a House Select Committee, so if they put together a criminal referral that isn't just like this person failed to show up to a subpoena, okay, that's one type of criminal referral. But if they put together huge amounts of evidence and a very clear assessment and evaluation of motive, of all the things that you need to actually do the thing, then it goes to the Department of Justice. And from what we understand, it already seems there's criminal investigations going on. If you're paying a lot of attention to the language being used by the committee, they're sort of like edging out where and when they can discuss stuff so that they're not scuttling those other investigations. This is something that often happens. Like you got the executive branch, you got two branches of the government, both investigating the same thing, and you're doing public hearings on one end. Well, you don't want to scuttle the private investigation. So the public will get some information from the Congress, which will help inform us just politically, and then they'll bundle that up and send it to the DOJ, and then it bolsters either an existing case or it starts a new one, as far as I understand. So there could be very huge consequences. I don't think people are going to let go of this.
A little more than an hour after Ms. Powell, Mr. Giuliani, General Flynn, and the others finally left the White House, President Trump sent the tweet on the screen now, telling people to come to Washington on January 6th.
And Peter Navarro just got arrested?
Be there, he instructed them. Will be wild.
It's like almost 1,000.
The committee also provided new perspective on events during the insurrection, like, for instance, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff testifying that Vice President Mike Pence, who was actively under siege in the Capitol, was, we think, it appears, basically running the country at the time.
Oh, okay.
There were 2 or 3 calls with Vice President Pence. He was very animated, and he issued very explicit, very direct, unambiguous orders.
Which is confusing because he's the vice president. Unless there was a 25th Amendment relieving the commander-in-chief of power, that was not constitutional. Like, vice president, I don't think, has that power to be ordering around the Joint Chief of Staff, right? Like, he can't be ordering around generals and shit, but...
There was no question about that. And he was, and I can get you the exact quotes, I guess, from some of our records somewhere, but he was very animated, very direct, very firm.
By contrast, here is General Milley's description of his conversation with President Trump's chief of staff, Mark Meadows, on January 6th.
Not even Trump. Not even Trump. Wow, just Mark Meadows.
He said, we have to kill the narrative that the vice president is making all the decisions.
Sheesh, kill the narrative. That's all that Mark Meadows cared about, was like making sure the public didn't find out that Trump was gleefully gloating during January 6th.
Golly gee, where would that narrative come from? The reason Pence was making all the decisions is because Trump steadfastly refused to stop the insurrection. It was what he wanted to happen, which we already knew from past reporting, but Congresswoman Cheney laid it out perfectly and with this new detail.
President Trump believed his supporters at the Capitol, and I quote, "We're doing what they should be doing." This is what he told his staff as they pleaded with him to call off the mob, to instruct his supporters to leave. You will hear testimony that, quote, "The president did not really want to put anything out calling off the riot or asking his supporters to leave." You will hear that President Trump was yelling and, quote, "really angry at advisors who told him he needed to be doing something more." And aware of the rioters' chance to hang Mike Pence, the president responded with this sentiment, quote, "Maybe our supporters have the right idea. Mike Pence, quote, deserves it."
Oh, God, that's so crazy. It's so crazy. Oh, you got such a smug look, though, Chris Hayes. Oh, my God. But yeah, come on. Like, how do you recover from that politically?
That made me sit up.
Yeah.
The president said his own vice president deserved to be lynched by the mob.
Very normal.
Because he would not go through with the plot to steal the election. That is a summary of what we learned from one night of these hearings. I suspect there's still more we will learn.
Okay, so that was a good little summary. He covered all the best bits. That was actually nice because there was a lot of talking. I didn't absorb everything, especially while I was streaming. And now it seems like I think there's some news. Bannon is like retorting, I think.
For Trump senior aide Steve Bannon, as you might expect.
Sorry, you have to see Jeffrey Toobin. I'm sorry.
Is slamming the hearings and using just some incredibly irresponsible language. Let's listen.
Trump won the presidency, and he is the legitimate president of the United States, and your guy's illegitimate, and the American people are awakening to that.
Yikes.
And we don't care what you have to say. And I dare Merrick Garland to take that crap there last night and try to indict Donald J. Trump. We dare you, because we will impeach. We're winning in November, and we're going to impeach you and everybody around you.
Yeah, these people are going.
Now, we know something's definitely wrong with Steve Bannon, but isn't there something wrong with Bannon being under federal indictment for contempt of Congress, and yet he is threatening the Attorney General of this country?
Yeah.
Okay,
we don't want to listen to Jeffrey Toobin. We actually don't care about Jeffrey Toobin. We're never going to listen to him ever again. Man, everyone really loves their peaches. Yeah, it's the summer, so you get some cold peaches, you get some freeze peaches, and everything's hunky dory. Okay, 27 minutes, and it should be live. It says. All right, let's see. This is ABC News. See if it's any new information.
In Washington now for another major story. Just moments ago, the January 6th committee released details about tomorrow's second televised hearing into the last year's Capitol insurrection. Former President Trump's campaign manager is expected to testify as the committee makes the case against Trump. Members now say that Trump was repeatedly told by advisors that he had
the second session will be happening in 27 minutes, in 30 minutes, apparently.
in fact lost the election, but they chose instead to lie about it and spark violence. Here's ABC's White House correspondent Mary Alice Parks.
The House January 6th Select Committee tonight preparing for their second televised hearing this month. The group says their focus tomorrow morning will be the immediate aftermath of the 2020 election. They plan to argue former President Trump was told repeatedly by his closest advisors that he had in fact lost the election fair and square, but chose to lie about it instead. And that lie in time animated both a legal effort to overturn the election and motivated those who attacked the Capitol.
He had to have known he was spreading a big lie, and he continues to spread it to this very day. He continues to foist that propaganda on his followers.
Members of the committee pressed if their ultimate goal is for the Department of Justice to indict Trump and whether that would be a good idea for the country. No former president has ever faced criminal charges.
Once the evidence is accumulated by the Justice Department, it
twice impeached and then criminally indicted. Can you imagine?
Needs to make a decision about whether it can prove to a jury beyond a reasonable doubt the president's guilt or anyone else's. But they need to be investigated if there's credible evidence, which I think there is.
How can you find an unbiased jury in America? Like, there's no way that there are Americans who have never heard of Trump and will be able to cast unbiased. Like, how is that going to work?
During last week's hearings, the committee's vice chair, Liz Cheney, accused some sitting Republican members of Congress of seeking pardons for attempting to overturn the election results. Congressman Adam Schiff telling ABC's Martha Raddatz that the committee has evidence to back up that claim.
Yeah, here's our jury of 5-year-olds and people who have awoken from comas that have lasted over 10 years. And also Svetlana, who doesn't speak English so well.
I think that is some of the most compelling evidence of a consciousness of guilt.
Tomorrow, Bill Stapien, President Trump's former campaign manager and data expert, is set to take the stand alongside Chris Steyerwalt, a former Fox News political editor who...
I mean, he literally had the bully pulpit. Like, it's of the most powerful country. He had the largest microphone humans know how to build.
Helped decide to call Arizona for President Biden.
I am not in a position now to tell you what my testimony will be about. I was asked to testify, and I gotta go.
We'll have to watch and see. Mary Alice Parks joins us now. Mary Alice, the January 6th committee will hold several hearings this week.
Mom, can I go home? No, we love Donald. You stay, and you say he's a good man. Yeah, like a parent tried to indoctrinate the kid that makes it onto the jury. Okay, this is silly.
What are some of the details you've just learned about what the members plan to present?
Lindsay, aides for the committee tonight told us that tomorrow they will show that former President Trump just did not have the votes to win and that he was told that. They say we'll hear testimony, too, from election officials who looked for fraud but just did not find it. And this is interesting. They said that they will look at the money trail, the ways that the former president actually fundraised off these fraud claims. Tomorrow is the first of 3 hearings from the committee this week. Lindsay?
First of 3. Oh boy.
Mary Alice, thank you. And ABC News will have continuing coverage.
Man, Politics Frog's eating good this week.
Of the January 6th investigation. David Muir and the entire team will be right here for the second.
Gaming frogs are starving out. Okay, so moving on. We got some legal analysts who are going to give some takeaways from the previous one, and select committee should be starting in 20 odd minutes.
Are Melissa Murray, MSNBC legal analyst, professor at NYU School of Law, and co-host of the podcast Strict Scrutiny. Neil Katyal, Saunders professor of law at Georgetown University and an MSNBC legal analyst. And Colorado Congressman Joe Neguse, a manager in Trump's second impeachment. Thank you all very much for coming to the Sunday show. The committee promised to show that Donald Trump was at the center of the action that unfolded on January 6th. In what we've seen so far, and with 3 days hindsight, how confident are you that they're going to credibly show that by the end of all?
It's not about credibly showing. Like, we're so past that point. Like, the evidence is overwhelming. I don't even know. It's about convincing the people who are like on the fence. Do they even exist yet?
All of the hearings. Melissa, I'll start with you.
Also, she's super based. She's super based. She's like a professor or something. Every time I hear her talk, I like sit. I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll listen to you.
Well, I think it's clear that there is something here and that Donald Trump is at the center of it. And this thing, the insurrection at the Capitol and everything else with regard to the efforts to litigate the overthrowing of the election in state courts and in federal courts, all of this is related to Donald Trump. I think the real question is, do the American people actually hear this message? Do they understand what this means and that this threat isn't in the rearview mirror, but rather is prospective and will go forward into 2022 in the midterm elections and on to 2024 and the next presidential election?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like big
Neil?
if true.
I'm 100% confidence, Jonathan. I'm pleased that the hearing didn't focus just on the low-level folks who attacked the Capitol on January 6th, but it focused laser-like on Donald Trump.
Yeah.
I think the committee was smart because it didn't.
Yeah, we know about all of the hooligans. There's like hundreds of them getting arrested. But what we don't know about is like the money trail. We don't know about like what the discussions were like in the inside circle. So any information about that will help understand motive and intent. How far back was this planned? Who was on the inside? Like there's all sorts of pretty significant stuff that should be coming out.
Let just the physical attack on January 6th be the whole story. I mean, after all, nobody woke up and decided for the first time that they thought the election was rigged or that they were going to go invade the Capitol. And I think one of the subtle questions that the committee's asking is, look, if it weren't for the attack, wouldn't it be worth investigating this plot anyway? The answer has to be a resounding yes, and the American public need to know about it. And in a weird way, focusing on just the attack lets Trump off the hook, because Trump wasn't, after all, on the scene on January 6th. There's no imagery of him breaking down the Capitol or something like that.
But this is very much about like the thought germs that are allowed to infect a society and just go viral. I mean, we often put Goebbels in the same camp of evil as Hitler. Like his influence over German media and ideas was instrumental to the Holocaust. Like we have to be pretty clear-eyed about how damaging some ideas, especially on social media when they can go viral, like can be to us as a society.
And it's like a mob hit and a mob investigation. The question is the planning before that. What did Trump know? When did he know it? How could he have sat on his hands when he knew the Capitol was under attack? Wasn't
Whoa. Can he even do that? Can he even sit on his hands?
that the whole plan? That's what the first committee hearing did so well, and I expect many more fireworks to come.
Congressman Neguse, of all the people on the screen right now, you are the only one who saw.
Oh, apparently Stepien not testifying. His wife is having a baby, according to Mueller, she wrote. So, not a big deal, apparently.
Tons of evidence as an impeachment manager in Trump's second impeachment as a result of the January 6th insurrection.
Are you saying he has short arms or he can't keep his mouth shut? I'm saying he has short arms, or then he has a fat ass so you can't get it there. You're just like, ugh. You get one there, but he can't get the other one. He's a big boy. He's got a big dumper.
Your view of the first day of the hearings.
Well, good to be with you, Jonathan. Look, I share Neil's confidence. I don't think there's ever been any ambiguity about former President Trump's actions on January 6th and the actions that he took in the months and the days leading up to that fateful day for our republic. I don't think there's any debate about his involvement in terms of the effort to subvert the peaceful transfer of power. As you noted, that evidence was on full display during the course of the second impeachment trial in February of 2021. I think
that's him just referring to his own credentials. He's just like, yeah, we did a good job in the second impeachment hearing, remember?
Yesterday, or rather last week's hearings, were incredibly compelling, and I think the hearings to follow will be as well, because they underscore, to Melissa's point, a really salient point, the threat that remains today. Some of the revelations that were made during the course of that first hearing on Thursday are revelations that I and other colleagues of mine were not aware of, particularly around the breakdown of the constitutional order with respect to Vice President Pence's actions regarding the security of the Capitol campus and his conversations allegedly with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And of course, the president's abdication and dereliction of his duties under the Constitution to protect the Capitol was something we were already well aware of, but clearly putting a finer point on it. And I think really underscoring a point that we made during the course of the impeachment trial, which was that the threats that existed on January 6th and in the days and weeks that followed would ultimately remain if the Congress was unwilling to do anything about it. And I think the threats have metastasized in many ways, and it's important.
Holy cow, man! That guy must be a lawyer, because like every sentence leads into the next, and it's holy cow, like take a breath there, buddy. Like let's actually unpack what you're saying. Holy cow. Yeah, I mean, he just said too many things.
Really underscoring a point that we made during the course of the impeachment trial, which was that the threats that existed on January 6th and in the days and weeks that followed would ultimately remain if the Congress was unwilling to do anything about it. And I think the threats have metastasized in many.
Right. Because people sat on their hands and didn't do anything. Right. The thought that I had that I wanted to communicate was like, for lawyers and the like, I would imagine that the weird stuff with Ginny Thomas at SCOTUS at the Supreme Court, and like all of this weirdness over who was actually in charge of the military in the executive, like that's got to be setting off alarm bells. Like these are the highest, like the most holy parts of the government, and they're just like being tinkered with like randomly, like ooh boy.
Ways, and it's important for the American public to have full transparency and knowledge of the same.
Now, on this issue of full transparency, Neil and Melissa, I want to hear from both of you, but I'll start with you, Melissa. The key caution in all of this, in watching these hearings, is that the January 6th hearings are not a court of law where there are rules of evidence and cross-examination of witnesses where the evidence can be challenged. So how much stock should the American people put in these hearings in terms of leading to accountability for Donald Trump and all those other folks who put this coup in motion?
Well, to be very clear, you're exactly right. The January 6th Special Committee doesn't have any prosecutorial authority here. It cannot bring any charges against Donald Trump or any of the other people who were involved in this. But what it can do is
it's like shift the public's opinion in the court of public opinion and like wrap up evidence in a tidy bow.
Is plead its case to the court of public opinion. I think that's especially important in getting Americans to understand that this is not a past threat, but one that is ongoing and deepening. And more importantly, can lay out the case before the American people in the hopes that the Department of Justice, which will have the authority to prosecute anyone related to the January 6th insurrection, to give this sort of final push that will perhaps propel the Department of Justice to continue expanding its ongoing investigation. We've already seen some really important developments in the DOJ's investigation. We've seen some charges against individuals, including the leaders of the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers. The question is, will that go further to those who were in the inner circle? And I think part of the hearing is not only only about public education, but also about making the case that further action, legal action, is actually necessary to quell this threat.
And Neil, pick up on that. What's your view right now in terms of, I mean, if the January 6th committee, as Melissa said, has no prosecutorial power, that means all the attention is on the Department of Justice. Do you think the Department of Justice will pick up the prosecutorial baton and go after?
That's the real question. If you're cynical, you'll think they'll drop it, which I don't blame you. They got Merrick Garland. Like, he is as hearty as a wet noodle.
Donald Trump.
Well, I do agree that some of the attention is on the Justice Department, but I think there's actually three audiences. And the way I think about this is just like when I argue a big Supreme Court case, Jonathan. There's the audience of the 9 in front of me. There's the audience listening online and, you know, in the world. And then there's the audience of history. And I feel the same thing about these hearings. There's the audience of the American public that...
Oh, God, we're going to win historically, everybody. Sure. Well, this is all the Wikipedia entry. Events leading up to the fascist takeover of America. Yay, we made it, history. We did it. Huzzah.
There's the audience of the Justice Department, and there's the audience of history. And absolutely, there isn't cross-examination and all those things. Those are only true if the Justice Department picks up the baton and starts to prosecute against higher-level officials like Donald Trump. But I think,
you know, we wouldn't be having these sorts of problems if the audience was her story and not his story. Am I right? Huh? Am I right?
I think what the committee has done so well is isolate the case against Donald Trump and ask, why is it that the Justice Department hasn't brought a prosecution yet? And there may be any number of reasons, but as this evidence generates, it's really hard for the Justice Department not to. We've already had a federal judge in California look at all this evidence and say it is more likely than not that Donald Trump committed felonies. And when you think about some of the testimony the committee gave, most powerfully Bill Barr, Trump's beloved former attorney general, calling Trump's claims about the election BS, you know, it becomes devastating to Trump. I mean, if Bill Barr knows anything, I mean, the guy has a PhD in BS, and he's calling Trump's claims that.
Good job, Neil.
Neil, to that point, let's have the American people hear Bill Barr in his own words. This is element 3, folks.
Are we actually going to get testimony?
I made it clear I did not agree with the idea of saying the election was stolen and putting out this stuff, which I told the president was bull.
I respect Attorney General Barr.
Where did he get that PhD? I want one. You just got to Google it. Just go PhD bullshit. That or shit post on Twitter for like 10 years.
So I accepted what he was saying.
I mean, because it's Sunday, we bleeped out the cussing. But Congressman,
that's why, because it's Sunday. Okay.
It gives me to give the last question to you. It's a political question.
You got a while to go. Yeah. How long have you been shitposting on Twitter, Loud Tyrant Youth? 2 years? You like barely got your baby steps.
And that is, did House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy make a mistake by not putting on one or two Republicans who could get approved by Speaker Pelosi, who also passed the laugh test, having folks on the committee who could be the interlocutor for the opposing view?
I certainly think so. I think it's confounding to me why the minority leader decided to take the steps that he did and essentially decided to not participate in the select committee's proceedings. But I just want to follow up on a point that Neil made, and I think he articulated it well. But there's a fourth audience for these hearings, and that is the United States Congress. I mean, the Congress is not powerless in all of this. Fundamentally, this is a legislative committee with a legislative purpose, and that is to make recommendations to the United States Congress about ways in which we can reform the laws that were weaponized by the former president and his acolytes in an attempt to subvert the peaceful transfer of power. We know that the Department of Justice was weaponized. We know that the Electoral Count Act, for example, is a archaic law on the books that unfortunately.
Oof, yeah, you have to get into a few feuds. You gotta get some blocks going. I don't know. You got some work to do.
created the kind of ambiguities that more nefarious actors sought to weaponize during the last presidential election.
But I mean, like, look at Bill Barr. That dude was like 105 years old. He got lots of time.
Certification process. So there are steps that we can take today to ensure that we mitigate against any potential future threats to our republic down the line. And I think this committee's hearings are going to be an important part of that process.
Nice. Yeah, that's what I want to see. Okay, this is the part I was trying to pull earlier. January 5th, 2021. New. Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley, the Senate President pro tempore. Pro tempore means he's the oldest one. Gives him certain ceremonial rights. So this guy, Chuck Grassley, in the Senate, says he and not Vice President Mike Pence will preside over the certification of Electoral College votes since, quote, we don't expect him to be there. What? Sorry, I said, what? Wait, what? How did Chuck Grassley know on January 5th that Vice President Mike wouldn't be there to preside over the certification of the Electoral College votes? And why would Chuck Grassley be stepping in for him? Because he's, I guess, number 3 on this list. It goes like Trump, or no, it would be Vice President. So, yeah, something's very fucky. This is one of those things that, like, has definitely stuck in my craw, and I've never been able to let go of it. It just makes me uncomfortable. All right, let's see what else we got. We got some images that are starting to pop up, and we got some ideas on what the panel is going to look like. So let's just bring that on up. Okay, so this is a look inside the room. All right, things are starting to come together. If I go check the actual live stream, yeah, it still says just delayed. Just says delayed. Start delayed by committee. Stay tuned. So we'll hang on to that. Get rid of all this stuff. Hearing Monday at 10, panel 1. Stepien, that's been canceled. Chris Stirewalt, we saw a bit of him on the telly. He's a former Fox political editor, so maybe he has some insight into like the texts that were sent by Fox News hosts to Mark Meadows. That part's fascinating to me. What was Fox News? That moment when Hannity takes the stage. This is takes the stage with Trump. This is like such an original sin moment.
Sean Hannity, come on up, Sean Hannity.
You can't do this. You can't pretend to be a journalist who covers politicians and then show up. Like, what's going on? Why is this happening? What's up there?
By the way, all those people in the back are fake news.
Amazing. I forgot he said that. What a crazy person. That's wild to me. So yeah, not good. And Sean Hannity, there's also like this weird revelation that he shared lawyer with Mike what's that? Michael Cohen, that's what it was. Sean Hannity is named as client of Michael Cohen, Trump's lawyer, in the New York Times, and this was published quite a while ago. Quote, I never paid Michael Cohen for legal fees. I did have occasional brief occasions with conversations with Michael Cohen. He's a great attorney about legal questions I had. Oops, probably shouldn't have admitted to that. So what's up with that? Then we're going to get to Benjamin Ginsburg, an election attorney. Then B.J. Pack, a former U.S. attorney for the Northern District of Georgia. Okay, so that should be spicy. And Al Schmidt, a former Philadelphia city commissioner. That's an odd one. Why would we care about a Philadelphia City Commissioner. I don't actually totally understand that. All right, let me just push on afterwards. Right, we got a recap here. Yeah, here we go. This is next.
The violent assault on the Capitol when the House Select Committee investigating the attack holds its second public hearing. Now, this committee is laying out evidence of an alleged conspiracy led by former President Donald Trump to overturn the 2020 presidential election. Scott McFarland is on Capitol Hill with more on this story. Scott, good morning to you. What do you expect to hear this morning?
Hey, Gail, today's focus is on how false claims about the election sparked the flame that led to the U.S. Capitol attack, and the committee is using all Republican witnesses to make their point.
The committee says this morning it'll show former President Trump was able to convince huge portions of the U.S. population the election was stolen.
Make no mistake, this election was...
Oh, and it looks like there might be some commentary we can just get from Washington Post instead of recaps.
And to try to argue that Donald Trump subverted democracy in an illegal way, it would probably be necessary for the Justice Department to show that he did so knowingly. And so each of these individual data points, these moments where his own people were telling him that he had lost the election, but he kept pushing ultimately for sort of extra legal ways to get around that, helps reflect on his potential state of mind. It's not uncomplicated because in a lot of instances we know that he immediately responded to all the many people who told him that he had lost the election by essentially saying he didn't believe it. So how you get around this this question of that Donald Trump himself didn't believe all these
That's
people
a weird question. I feel like that's a deep philosophical question almost.
Complicated.
Right, because there's the question of, like, did he ever say to someone, yeah, I know I lost, but, right? So getting in state of mind is hard to prove.
That's a good question.
Absolutely, and we saw this come up quite directly after the committee's hearing last week, where I believe it was Jason Miller, a former aide to Trump, they played a clip of his testimony talking about how he had told Trump that he had lost the election. And Miller came out afterwards to say that they didn't play the next part of the clip. And the next part of the clip is him explaining that Trump didn't believe him. And so, you know, you're exactly right. There is this big question: can they draw out testimony from any
weird.
person
Come on.
who says not
There's
only
no
that Trump
way.
was told?
There's no way that someone could just do a coup d'etat and just say, I'm not doing a coup d'etat. I refuse to believe that this is what's happening. Like, there's no way that's the legal defense. Come on.
Ross, one thing the committee has been trying to get at is the financial aspect of this and whether Trump tried to raise money off of this false claim that the election was stolen.
Yeah, this is something I'm quite interested in seeing what they've got. It's an
Made money off
area
this?
where there's been a lot of reporting, but a place where the power of the subpoena that they have to gather documents and look at records is really powerful. And so, you know, there has been some information ahead of this morning that they're going to be laying out new information about the ways in which people around Trump who knew that these things were lies nevertheless used them to raise money, you know, which feels like it is a thing that, you know, feels pretty shady, if not outright fraudulent, to do that.
They made T-shirts.
Raise money off of something you know to be untrue. This is another area where the committee's work could maybe intersect. We'll see. With an actual Justice Department criminal investigation. We at the Washington Post have reported that there is a criminal investigation underway into the fundraising practices and spending of one close Trump ally in this time period, Sidney Powell. It's not clear to me that that investigation is looking at this issue of whether the money was raised off of a lie. It might be much more of a garden variety. You know, did people personally enrich themselves off of the money they were raising? And of course, we don't know exactly what they're looking at. We just know that they've issued subpoenas and have been doing interviews.
So, Roz, James laid out for us a few moments ago who's testifying today and their significance. what will you be listening for? One of the people testifying, Al Schmidt, is this former Republican city commissioner in Philadelphia. What should we sort of tune our ears to as people like him testify and reflect on what happened in November of 2020?
Yeah.
Yeah, a few things. I mean, with regards to Al Schmidt, I think that he may be there in part to give the hearing some emotion. It seems clear that they have wanted there to be some compelling emotion in each of these sessions. He can really provide a face to some of the consequences of these lies.
Right.
He can sort of be a stand-in for the hundreds of elections officials around the country who faced really graphic and terrifying death threats.
Yeah, that's what I didn't understand.
Supporters of the former president as a result of these lies, and I would assume we're going to hear some about that from former Commissioner Schmidt. I'm quite interested in the testimony that James was discussing from the former U.S. Attorney in Georgia. We know that we have a whole separate day later this week, specifically around Trump's efforts to subvert the Justice Department. So it's interesting to me that they chose to have the former U.S. Attorney speak today separately from that session. I presume there's a reason why. My guess is because he helps build the case that Trump was told by responsible people that there was no fraud. He was assigned the task of doing that investigating, went out and did the investigating and came back and said there's no there there. Okay. So I think that's why he's probably today, but that could be really interesting.
Details.
Roz Helderman, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time and all your reporting on this. Rhonda Colvin, let's go to you. You know, we just heard from Roz and James, the who's who of those testifying and why they're significant. Let's talk more about the committee members. And you've been telling us about Zoe Lofgren and her role today, but if people are just tuning in, tell us about what we expect to see from her and why she is so significant in today's proceedings.
Well, Zoe Lofgren has also been a part of other investigations. You'll remember she was also an impeachment manager. And as I also said a little earlier, she heads the House Administration Committee, which handles overseeing the Capitol Police, handles overseeing some of the nuts and bolts of the infrastructure here in the Capitol complex. So she's coming with a lot of background information from both her committee as well as what she has learned behind closed doors as a part of her role in this committee. So she will be leading the presentation that will be brought up. We are expecting that they will have continue to have those multimedia presentations brought up on screen. We also know that, of course, we have witnesses who will be here in person, but we'll also continue to see some clips from those taped depositions. So she'll be leading the way. And of course, that's not unique when it comes to this committee. They have been showing their membership and the strength of their membership. And
we got a thread from Seth Abramson, who is a good reporter. He's live tweeting during the session. Some of this is pretty juicy, so we're gonna read it rather than listen to someone drone on. Okay, beginning at 9 a.m., he's offering critical framing, yada yada yada. 3 witnesses, there's likely a 4th, who will testify today over 2 live witness panels in the 2+ hour hearing. We got Ben Ginsburg, Republican attorney and election expert, Chris Stirewalt, former Fox News political analyst, and not Bill Stepien, the 2020 Trump campaign official whose wife is having a baby, it seems. Ginsburg, the first one, was a far-right election law lawyer for the Republican brass in the 2000s, assisting the party with racist, anti-democratic voter suppression efforts and other election shenanigans that were horrifying but pale in comparison to what we see from the Republican Party today. Though many of us haven't forgotten Ginsburg's odious work in the 2000s, the broad consensus in Washington seems to be that he redeemed himself by doing the bare minimum any person of conscience could do in the 2010s, vocally opposing the excesses of the Trump administration. Stirewalt was fired by Fox News. So the second guy, Stirewalt, was fired by Fox News for being the network's supposedly early call of Arizona for Joe Biden in November 2020. Of course, we now know his call was entirely correct, but also that Trumpism owns FNC, which is why Stirewalt was terminated for telling the truth. As an ex-Trump campaign official, Stepien is clearly a Trump partisan with few scruples. Imagine the lack of moral fiber it took to work for Trump in 2020. But his appearance before the committee continues its trend of calling witnesses Trump cannot say are Democrat partisans. although we'll probably see him a bit later on. The purpose, the idea here is that Trump was unambiguously told to expect an election loss, then willingly chose to bring in people from outside his campaign, folks with little understanding of election data and fewer scruples, to tell him that he should have won despite him knowing better. Two people Trump brought in immediately, amoral sycophants who had much to gain by lying to Trump, were Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell. But here's the thing. Understanding the names involved here is far less important than understanding what the committee is really up to now. The committee has gone about the hearings so far as though they're federal prosecutors offering America an opening statement and preliminary case in chief in the case of United States v. Donald Trump. They're squarely focused on the specific statutes they say Trump violated. Several of those statutes are fraud statutes, which, like any criminal statute, contain a mental state. In legal terms, mens rea. In colloquial terms, criminal intent. Prosecutors must prove. Sample statutory mental states include, among a few others you may have heard, purposefully, willfully, knowingly, recklessly, and negligently. The upshot is that you cannot be convicted of a crime if the prosecutor cannot show that you were in a certain state of mind as you committed the criminal act. The same goes for Trump and fraud. Reports have come in that Stepien won't be appearing. He's claiming a family emergency, which, we should be clear, given that this was the most important moment of his life and the most important testimony he'll ever give, no one believes. It could be true. I thought his wife was pregnant. I'll say as a former criminal defense lawyer and federal criminal investigator that if you've ever occupied either of those roles, your Occam's razor explanation for Stepien backing out of testifying is federal criminal witness tampering by Trump or his agents. Wow. Big if true, Seth. Obviously, if there were an active DOJ investigation of Trump, which Adam Schiff recently said he sees no evidence of yet, the FBI would be looking into Stepien dropping out of the hearing, especially given Trump's long history of witness tampering. It would be easy enough for a Trump agent, whether a family member, aide, advisor, attorney, or associate, well, some nice alliteration going on there, to point out to Stepien that he will never work in GOP politics again if he testifies. I expect Trump always planned to lean on witnesses once disclosed. Now, it's always possible there is a real family emergency for Stepien. I'm not saying otherwise. I'm just saying that it should be looked into. The timing is incredibly coincidental. Fair. If there's an emergency, Stepien should reschedule his testimony, and I certainly hope he does. Like, I can't imagine that he wouldn't.
Some of the government officials who they say came.
Okay, still commentary, still not live. Trump has a history of witness tampering. Stepien's the first known Trump partisan to be scheduled to give live testimony, so he's the first person Trump would be in a position to tamper with, and testifying may indeed destroy Stepien's professional career. Update. If Stepien's wife is indeed in labor, as is now being reported, most importantly, I wish her and Bill all the best, and I hope that all goes well at the hospital. Egg on face. You dummy, you dummy. Secondly, we must take two things from this situation. Stepien must agree to reschedule to show that, as now seems to be the case, this cancellation had nothing to do with an unwillingness to testify. Secondly, it calls into question leaking live witnesses before they appear. The committee must continue to do all it can to keep closed its witness list. Fair. Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Returning to the critical framing that I was discussing in tweet number 14, I stopped tracking. The committee today is working to establish Trump's criminal intent when he began defrauding the United States and possibly committing wire fraud, election fraud, and other forms of fraud via the big lie. So I'm just going to check in on this. Okay. Trump defenders will point to the fact that Trump has always said he believes he won, and also, less charitably to him, but with the same result, that he is exactly the sort of lifelong narcissist who could convince himself of something favorable to that is delusional. The problem here, and the committee must explain this to America, is the legal doctrine of willful ignorance. Simply put, you can't escape the establishment of criminal intent by deliberately keeping yourself ignorant of the truth of a given situation. that happened here. Ah, that actually answers a massive question I've always had, because that seemed like the play. But I guess if you're like the commander-in-chief and you turn your phone off during an insurrection, but you're like watching it on TV, like you can't play dumb to the roles and responsibilities like that you inherited when you took on the job. Like you can't just kind of wave that away, can you? Like what? Okay, moving forward. So Trump loses the defense of earnest belief to a fraud indictment if the committee now, and DOJ later, can show that a reasonable person in his position would have understood himself to have lost the 2020 presidential election based on all the information he received. So now you see why today's hearing is so key. The House January 6th committee will show that from the jump, all the credible information Trump had that a reasonable person in his position would trust would have told him he was going to lose and did lose, and he sought willful ignorance instead. Oh my God, that's interesting. Journalists habitually falsely imply Trump's sociopathy, narcissism, and penchant for self-delusion aids him in escaping criminal liability for any offense that requires the highest mental state, i.e. purposefully. Not surprisingly, our justice system is smarter than that. So info that may seem esoteric, like the known fact that certain blue cities always report votes late, that a blue shift in vote tallies was expected before election night 2020 because absentee ballots skew blue and get counted late, is actually critical information. Trump had the best election advisors and data analysts that money could buy. Or at least the very best ones of America's two major political parties has produced. And he was not legally entitled to decide that he knew better than everything they were telling him. Interesting. Unanimously, he adds in brackets. Put another way, no reasonable person would have acted as Trump did or believed what he did, and Trump can't defend himself against fraud claims. Or he can, but not successfully, by claiming that he earnestly believed something no reasonable person could or would have believed. And of course, Trump went well beyond self-delusion. He pushed for Stirewalt to get fired. He backed, well, that part we don't know for sure. I don't know about that part. He backed conspiracy theories without any evidence whatsoever, for sure. He persisted in lying to America after he lost lawsuit after lawsuit, for sure. All of this is future evidence in a criminal trial. Okay. The hearing has been pushed back 30 to 45 minutes. We know why. There's no surprise or mystery or incompetence in this. It's what you'd normally expect. Yada, 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 yada. Per CNN, the plan for today was 2 live witness panels interspersed with depot excerpts, and summaries from HJ6C members. With Stepien out, and again, he should reschedule, that plan is discombobulated a bit, as only one panel may be possible or a slight shift in topic required. While the HJ6C has no say in the DOJ indicting Trump, it's presenting evidence of a quality and volume that establishes probable cause at a minimum, the standard for indictment, though prosecutors don't indict until they feel they can prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt. And B, evidence like that will be presented today puts real public pressure on the DOJ to do something. Not political pressure, as I do not think Garland is susceptible to that, but evidentiary pressure, because the public now knows how strong the case against Donald Trump is. To be clear, based on the evidence I've published at Proof, some of which has been cited by the H6JC, and which I know they follow, the evidence against Trump, who's now just a citizen like you or me, is at the beyond a reasonable level and not merely probable cause. Beyond a reasonable doubt, I should say. Update. MSNBC is reporting that the House January 6th committee is going to splice together video of Stepien's recorded testimony rather than reschedule his live testimony. They had backup, which I understand, but would also say give an incentive for future live witnesses to back out to protect their careers. Okay, so things are starting to heat up already. Give me a second. I got an audio message. Just one moment, please, as I take care of that. Okay, so yeah, I'm gonna have someone at my door soon, and I'll just throw on the hearing, and then we'll go from there. It looks like people are in the room. That stuff's starting to come. So yeah, by the time we finish this, it should be live. That should be good. Okay. Stepien is a former 2020 Trump campaign manager who very much wants a future in far-right GOP politics. He is actually working hard to defeat Liz Cheney in Congress. I have no doubt his wife is in labor, but he did before. But he also has many reasons to not want to testify live. Keep in mind that Trump didn't just lie about the facts of the 2020 election, he lied about what he'd been told, which is key because witnesses, voluntary ones or, like Stepien, subpoenaed ones, can therefore contradict Trump's lies in the most direct way possible. Another note about the timing of today's hearings. Some Supreme Court decisions are likely to be handed down today. Oh, no shot. We don't know which ones. Yeah, like this is like this entire month is going to be bonanzas because the Supreme Court is just going to be handing down decision after decision after decision. So, yeah, for sure. Watch this space. It's going to be spicy tamale. All right, moving on. Hearing still hasn't began. Getting there, though. Getting there. Yet another note to make is that the DOJ has publicly asked Congress to hand over its interview transcripts. Okay, cool. So we don't have to speculate on whether the DOJ is watching the opening statement-like presentation. It is. Apparently, Garland has said that he's watching the hearings. Okay, good to know. Let me just move this up a little bit. So, as you see deposition excerpts in these hearings and think, perhaps, they're less powerful than live testimony, realize that they're not. The DOJ will review both deposition transcripts and live testimony transcripts, meaning both types of transcripts arrive at DOJ in the same form. The fourth witness that was scheduled for today, who will now be the third live witness that we know of after Stepien pulled out, is B.J. Pack, an ex-U.S. attorney for Northern Georgia. There have long been allegations that Trump pushed Pack out of his job post-election. As most of you know, because of Trump's now infamous recorded phone call with Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, who will also testify a bit later on, Trump worked particularly hard to illegally overturn the accurate 2020 election result in Georgia. Trump's MO is clear. When he finds that someone is an obstacle, he either pushes them out, witness tampers, libels, slanders, or seeks to intimidate them. B.J. Pack and Steyerwalt fit this maxim. Okay, so I'm going to put on the committee. It's playing right now, and I will be right back. I have to go take care of a thing. I'll be about like 5-10 minutes. Don't go away. I'll be right back. Did I miss anything? I hope not. Looks like it's just starting soon. Okay. That was my mom popping by with some groceries she had gotten like a week ago. We forgot to unload from the car. All like carrots and root veg. Okay, thank goodness. Whew, it's just been this. Oh, I'm sorry. My mom knew I was live streaming, but needed me to call her because she was driving. So I didn't have the time to like put up some music or anything. Sorry. But okay, we are back. We get to go. Let's see what we can. Oh, are members filing in? No, not yet. So let's see what we can do to fill in the space in between the space. In between the space. And also, hey, you know, support the channel, or check out some of the other stuff that I do. I've got like a TikTok now and an Instagram and a YouTube. Well, I mean, if you're on YouTube, you know that. Okay, it looks like Steyerwalt has taken the stand. That's slightly exciting. Things are happening. Okay, while we're waiting, this was news I meant to cover. Hate crime investigation is now underway after alleged Proud Boys storm drag queen story hour at a Bay Area library. There should be I think there was like a video of this. I'll see if I can pull it. But yeah, they're not sending their best. They're not sending their brightest. Oh God. Police are investigating an incident that occurred during a drag queen story hour at the San Lorenzo Library on Saturday afternoon, after Panda Dolce, the San Francisco drag performer hosting the reading, said they were targeted by a group of 8 to 10 Proud Boys who stormed the room and shouted homophobic and transphobic threats at them, forcing them to leave the event with a security guard and hide in a back office. I was going to see some theater during the Fringe Festival, and I came across La Grande Bibliothèque de Montréal, like our largest library, and there's this massive line. And now I think that was because there's probably another drag queen like story hour, but like we actually love our LGBTQ community here in Montreal. So yeah, it was like one of the largest lines I've seen. It was awesome. The Alameda County Sheriff's Office said that police responded to a report of a disturbance at the library at around 1:30 p.m. and discovered 5 men described as members of the Proud Boys organization. The men were described as extremely aggressive, with a threatening, violent demeanor causing people to fear for their safety. The sheriff's office said, "It is not clear whether they are members of the National Proud Boys organization or were simply representing themselves as such." The sheriff's office said an active hate crime investigation is underway, as is an investigation into the annoying and harassing of children. Imagine going to...
This program was made possible by contributions to your PBS...
Adge. Oh God, Adge. Yeah, I mean, imagine like going to protect the children and then getting clapped up by the law with with charges that are saying like you endangered kids or you threatened them. Like, not a good look, Sweaty. Not a good look. All right, let's see here.
This is 2 Republicans, 7
Yes,
Democrats. Chairman
Finally.
Benny Thompson takes the lead here, really sharing so much
Let's
of
go.
the presentation and work with Vice Chair Liz Cheney. There's Congresswoman Lofgren flanking the chairman, someone we expect to hear a lot from today. This is live coverage from the Washington Post. We will be with you during any breaks and to wrap things up as the committee ends its day later on, and we'll be with you broadcasting all of their hearings live this month. Let's go now to the
let's go.
Cannon House Office building and this second in a series of hearings in June for the January 6th Select Committee.
Finally. They've taken the stand. We might have to switch streams if we get too much commentary from them Washington Post journalists. What do they know? I'm a C-SPAN boy. Oh, gavel.
The Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol will be in order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare the committee in recess at any point. Pursuant to House Deposition Authority Regulation 10, the chair announces the committee's approval to release the deposition material presented during today's hearing. Good morning. Last week, the Select Committee laid out a preview of our initial findings about the conspiracy overseen and directed by Donald Trump to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election and block the transfer of power, a scheme unprecedented in American history. My colleagues and I don't want to spend time talking about ourselves during these hearings, but as someone who's run for office a few times, I can tell you at the end of a campaign, it all comes down to the numbers.
Yep.
The numbers tell you the winner and the loser.
Yep.
For the most part, the numbers don't lie. But if something doesn't add up with the numbers, you go to court to get resolution.
True.
And that's the end of the line. We accept those results. That's what it means to respect the rule of law.
Yeah.
That's what it means to seek elective office in our democracy.
Let's
Because
go.
those numbers aren't just numbers, they're votes. They're your votes. They are the will and the voice of the people.
True.
And the very least we should expect from any person seeking a position of public trust is the acceptance of the will of the people, win or lose. Donald Trump didn't. He didn't have the numbers, he went to court. He still didn't have the numbers, he lost. But he betrayed the trust of the American people. He ignored the will of the voters.
Traitor.
He lied to his supporters and the country. And he tried to remain in office after the people had voted him out. And the courts upheld the will of the people.
Yeah.
This morning, we'll tell the story of how Donald Trump lost an election and knew he lost an election, and as a result of his loss, decided to wage an attack on our democracy, an attack on the American people by trying to rob you of your voice in our democracy, and in doing so, lit the fuse that led to the horrific violence of January 6th, when a mob of his supporters stormed the Capitol sent by Donald Trump to stop the transfer of power. Today, my colleague from California, Ms. Lofgren, and our witnesses will detail the Select Committee's findings on these matters. But first, I will recognize our distinguished Vice Chair, Ms. Cheney of Wyoming, for any opening statement she'd care to offer.
Yo, just Liz Cheney, you
Thank
gonna
you
save
very
us?
much, Mr. Chairman. Last week, as the chairman noted, our committee began outlining a 7-part plan overseen by President Trump to overturn the 2020 election. Today, we will begin looking at the initial part of that plan. President Trump's effort to convince millions of Americans that the election was stolen from him by overwhelming fraud. A federal court has already reviewed elements of the committee's evidence on this point and said this, quote, "In the months following the election, numerous credible sources from the president's inner circle to agency leadership and statisticians informed President Trump and Dr. Eastman that there was no evidence of election fraud," close quote, sufficient to overturn the 2020 presidential election. The court's opinion methodically documents each of the principal reasons for that conclusion, and I would urge all those watching to read it. Today, we will begin to show the American people some of our evidence. Today, you will hear much more from a former Attorney General Bill Barr's recorded testimony.
Nice.
And you will hear in greater detail what others in the department told President Trump, that his claims of election fraud were nonsense.
All right.
You will also hear much more from President Trump's own campaign experts, who had also concluded that his fraud claims could not be supported. Let me focus briefly on just 3 points now. First, you will hear firsthand testimony that the president's campaign advisors urged him to await the counting of votes and not to declare victory on election night.
Wow.
The president understood even before the election that many more Biden voters had voted by mail because President Trump ignored the advice of his campaign experts and told his supporters only to vote in person.
Right.
Donald Trump knew before the election that the counting of those mail-in ballots in several states would not begin until late in the day and would not be complete for multiple days.
Right.
This was expected, reported, and widely known.
Widely discussed.
You will also hear testimony that President Trump rejected the advice of his campaign experts on election night and instead followed the course recommended by an apparently inebriated Rudy Giuliani to just claim he won and insist that the vote counting stop.
Really?
Falsely claim everything was fraudulent. He falsely told the American people that the election was not legitimate. In his words, quote, a major fraud. Millions of Americans believed him. Second, pay attention to what Donald Trump and his legal team said repeatedly about Dominion voting machines.
Right.
Far-flung conspiracies with a deceased Venezuelan communist allegedly pulling the strings.
Yes.
This
Amazing.
was, quote, complete nonsense, as Bill Barr said. President Trump's own campaign advisors, his Department of Justice, and his cybersecurity experts all told him the same thing. Here, for example, is White House lawyer Eric Hirschman. His view was shared by many of the Trump team whom we interviewed.
I thought the Dominion stuff was, I never saw any evidence whatsoever to sustain those allegations.
Nice. Nice.
And
Good
third,
clip.
as Mike Pence's staff started to get a sense for what Donald Trump had planned for January 6th, they called the campaign experts to give them a briefing on election fraud and all the other election claims. On January 2nd, the general counsel of the Trump campaign, Matthew Morgan, this is the campaign's chief lawyer, summarized what the campaign had concluded weeks earlier, that none of the arguments about fraud or anything else could actually change the outcome of the election.
Nice. Pin him to the wall.
Generally discussed on that topic was whether the fraud, maladministration, abuse, or irregularities, if aggregated and read most favorably to the campaign, would that be outcome determinative? And
outcome determinative?
I think everyone's assessment in the room, at least amongst the staff, Mark Short, myself, and Greg Jacob, was that it was not sufficient to be outcome determinative.
As is obvious, this was before the attack on the Capitol. The Trump campaign legal team knew
Too early to call.
there was no legitimate argument, fraud, irregularities, or anything to overturn the election. And yet President Trump went ahead with his plans for January 6th anyway. Mr. Chairman, hundreds of our countrymen have faced criminal charges.
Yeah.
Many
like
are
800?
serving criminal sentences because they believed what Donald Trump said about the election, and they acted on it.
Yeah.
They came to Washington, D.C. at his request. They marched on the Capitol at his request. And hundreds of them besieged and invaded the building at the heart of our constitutional republic. As one conservative editorial board put it recently, quote, Mr. Trump betrayed his supporters by conning them on January 6th, and he is still doing it.
The big con. the big
Another
lie.
conservative editorial board that has long supported President Trump said last week, Donald Trump, quote, won't stop insisting that 2020 was stolen, even though he has offered no proof that that is true. And this, Donald Trump now, quote, clings to more fantastical theories, such as Dinesh D'Souza's debunked 2,000 mules, even as recounts in Arizona,
Dinesh
Georgia, and
D'Souza?
Wisconsin confirm
Oh, no.
Trump lost.
Oh no. Oh,
Those
no,
are the
oh, no.
correct conclusions to draw from the evidence gathered by this committee. We have much more evidence to show the American people on this point than we can reasonably show in one hearing. But today, we will begin. Thank you,
Nice,
Mr. Chairman.
let's
I yield back.
go.
Without objection, the chair recognizes the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Lofgren, for an opening statement.
Ms. Lofgren.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. In our opening hearing, we gave an overview of our investigation into the January 6th attack. The plot to overthrow the election was complex and had many parts, which we'll explore in remaining hearings.
Apparently.
But today, we examine the false narrative that the 2020 election was, quote, stolen. Former President Trump's plan to overturn the election relied on a sustained effort to deceive millions of Americans with knowingly false claims of election fraud.
Knowingly false.
All elements of the plot relied on convincing his supporters about these false claims.
Interesting.
Today, we'll demonstrate the 2020 election was not stolen. The American people elected President Joe Biden. We'll present evidence that Mr. Trump's claims of election fraud were false, that he and his closest advisors knew those claims were false, but they continued to peddle them anyway. Right up until the moments before a mob of Trump supporters attacked the Capitol. We'll also show that the Trump campaign used these false claims of election fraud to raise hundreds of millions of dollars from supporters who were told their donations were for the legal fight in the courts.
We gotta fight back, brother.
The Trump campaign didn't use the money for that. The big lie was also a big ripoff. The former president laid the groundwork for these false claims well in advance of the election. As early as April 2020, Mr. Trump claimed that the only way he could lose an election would be as a result of fraud.
Nice.
You know the things with bundling and all of the things that are happening with
bundling
votes by mail, where thousands of votes are gathered, and I'm not going to say which party does it, but thousands of votes are gathered and they come in and they're dumped in a location, and then all of a sudden you lose elections that you think you're going to win.
The only way we're going to lose this election is if the election is rigged. Remember that. It's the only way we're going to lose this election.
This is going to be a fraud like you've never seen. Did you see what's going on? Take a look at West Virginia, mailmen selling the ballots. They're being sold. They're being dumped in rivers. This is a horrible thing for our country. This is not going to end well.
Wow, that is crazy.
Mr. Trump decided even before the election that regardless of the facts and the truth, if he lost the election, he would claim it was rigged. Mr. Trump was right about one thing.
It's got to be worth something.
It did not end well. On election night, Mr. Trump claimed even before the votes were counted that his loss was a result of fraud. Now, Thursday, we had testimony from Attorney General Barr about the Department of Justice investigation of Mr. Trump's fraud claims. Barr told Trump directly that his claims were BS. Yet, after hearing the truth and that warning from the AG, Mr. Trump continued to peddle the false claims of fraud. You'll hear detailed testimony from Attorney General Barr describing the various election fraud claims the Department of Justice investigated. He'll tell you how he told Mr. Trump repeatedly that there was no merit to those claims. Mr. Barr will tell us that Mr. Trump's election night claims of fraud were made without regard to the truth and before it was even possible to look for evidence of fraud. Attorney General Barr wasn't alone. You'll see and hear today other Department of Justice officials and senior advisors to Mr. Trump that they told him the claims he was making were not supported by evidence. The election fraud claims were false. Mr. Trump's closest advisors knew it. Mr. Trump knew it. That didn't stop him from pushing the false claims and urging his supporters to, quote, fight like hell, to, quote, take back their country.
Yeah, all the classic
After
quotes.
he lost the election, various legal challenges were made. You'll hear testimony today from a renowned Republican election litigation lawyer who will explain the normal process by which candidates challenge an election. Rather than accept the results of the election and the decisions of the courts, Mr. Trump pursued a different strategy. He tried to convince the American people the election had been stolen. Many of his supporters believed him, and many still believe him today. The attack on January 6th was a direct and predictable result of Mr. Trump's decision to use false claims of election fraud to overturn the election and to cling to power. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you very much. I now welcome our first witness.
All right, let's go. This is the real beat.
We're joined today by former Fox News politics editor Chris Stilwell. Bill Stepien, President Trump's former campaign manager, was subpoenaed to be here and was in Washington this morning, prepared to testify. Kevin Marino, Mr. Stepien's attorney, is here with us today. Thank you, Mr. Marino, for coming. And he has advised us that Mr. Stepien's wife went into labor this morning.
Labor.
Mr. Stepien unexpectedly had to travel to be with his wife, and we wish him the best. Due to the depth and rigor of our investigation, we have several hours of Mr. Stepien's testimony from when we interviewed him in February, and we will be presenting that testimony today. I'll now swear in our witness. The witness will please stand and raise his right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
I do.
Thank you. You may be seated.
Nice.
Let the record reflect the witness answered in the affirmative. I now recognize myself for questions. I want to start by showing a video that tells the story of what was going on in the Trump White House on election night in November of 2020.
Do you remember where you were on the night of the election, November the 3rd?
I was at the White House.
You know where specifically over the course of that night you spent your time within the White House?
There was an event that was organized in the residence, so I moved between the residence, a room sort of off the residence where some family members were.
I take it the president was upstairs in the residence.
He was upstairs. We were kind of on the first floor, so not upstairs. We were with mostly with Ivanka and her brothers and a couple other people who'd be coming in and out.
Can you just describe the atmosphere? What were people expecting that night when you got to the White House?
Good question.
I think that there was, typically for people who show up there on election night, it's going to be a self-select, more positive environment. I think people were a little bit nervous, not knowing what was going to happen with the red wave or the red mirage as the debate was being carried out.
The Fox News Decision Desk is calling Arizona for Joe Biden. That is a big get for the Biden campaign.
Arizona's called. Do you remember that?
I do.
What do you remember happening where you were when Arizona was called?
There was surprise at the call.
Who was surprised?
Most everyone in the room.
Were you being one of them?
Yes.
Did that shift the atmosphere or the attitude in the White House?
Completely.
Wow.
How so? Can you describe that?
Because Fox News was the first one to go out and say that.
Right.
So was it anger kind of directed towards Fox News for making a call more so than like disappointment that maybe the campaign lost Arizona?
Right.
All the above.
All the above.
So both anger and disappointment.
Wow.
Both disappointment with Fox and concerned that maybe our data or our numbers weren't accurate.
Were you in the White House residence during the sort of past midnight into the early morning hours of November 4th?
Yes, oh sure. It went over beyond midnight, yes.
Do you remember Rudy Giuliani being at the White House on election night and into the early hours the next morning?
I do.
What do you remember about when he came?
Testimony from Stepien.
He was, I had heard that he was upstairs, in that aforementioned reception area.
and he was looking to talk to the president, and it was suggested instead that he come talk to several of us down off the map room.
You said that you had heard that Mr. Giuliani wanted to talk to the president, and then he was directed your way. Did you end up talking to Mr. Giuliani when he was directed your way?
I did.
What was that conversation?
A lot of conversations were directed my way. A few of us, myself, Jason Miller, Justin Clark, and Mark Meadows, gathered in a room off the map room to listen to whatever Rudy presumably wanted to say to the president.
Was there anyone in that conversation who, in your observation, had too much to drink?
Like Mayor Giuliani.
Tell me more about that. What was your observation about his potential intoxication during that discussion about what the president should say when he's addressed the nation on election night?
It wasn't potential.
And the mayor was definitely intoxicated, but I do not know his level of intoxication when he spoke with the president, for example.
Were you part of any discussions with the people I mentioned, Mr. Stepien, Mr. Meadows, or anyone else, about whether the president should make any sort of speech on election night?
Like a concession speech?
I spoke to the president. They may have been present, but President spoke to the president several times that night.
There were suggestions by, I believe it was Mayor Giuliani, to go and declare victory and say that we'd won it outright.
It was far too early to be making any calls like that. Ballots were still being counted. Ballots were still going to be counted for days. And it was far too early to be making any proclamation like that.
I remember saying that, to the best of my memory, I was saying that we should not go and declare victory until we had a better sense of the numbers.
Okay, can you be more specific about that conversation, in particular what Mayor Giuliani said, your response, and then anybody else in the room's response?
I think effectively Mayor Giuliani was saying, we won it, they're stealing it from us, where'd all the votes come from? We need to go say that we won. And essentially that anyone who didn't agree with that position was being weak.
What was your view at the time as to what he should or shouldn't say?
The truth is for weak people.
I don't know that I had a firm view as to what he should say in that circumstance. The results were still being counted. It was becoming clear that the race would not be called on election night.
My belief, my recommendation was to say that votes were still being counted. It's too early to tell, too early to call the race, but we proud of the race we ran, and we think we're in good position, and we'll have more to say about this the next day or the next day whenever we had something.
So he was like, let's do the copium.
And did anybody who was a part of that conversation disagree with your message?
Right.
Yes.
Who was that?
The president disagreed with that.
Ooh.
I don't recall the particular words. He thought I was wrong. He told me so, and that they were gonna go he was gonna go in a different direction.
This is
that
a fraud
motion. He's
on the American public. This is an embarrassment to our country. We were getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election.
Should not have done that.
Mr. Steiwalt, did President Trump have any basis to declare victory on November 4th, 2020? Thank you. Mr. Stepien also testified that President Trump had no basis for declaring victory at that point in time.
My belief, my recommendation was to say that votes were still being counted. It's too early to tell. Too early to call the race.
It's really important.
But you know, we proud of the race we ran, and we, you know, think we're in good position, and we'll have more to say about this, you know, the next day or the next day, whenever we had something to say.
Thank you. Mr. Stilwell, after the votes were counted, who won the presidential election of 2020?
Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. of the great state of Delaware.
Thank you. That's the bottom line. We've had an election. Mr. Trump lost, but he refused to accept the results of the democratic process. Pursuant to Section 5C8 of House Resolution 503, I now recognize the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Lofgren, for questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Schauwald, I'd like you to explain a term that was thrown around a lot during the election, and that's the so-called red mirage. What does that mean?
Red mirage?
So,
right.
In the 40 or 50 years, let's say, that Americans have increasingly chosen to vote by mail or early or absentee, Democrats prefer that method of voting more than Republicans do. So basically, in every election, Republicans win election day and Democrats win the early vote. And then you wait and start counting, and it depends on which ones you count first, but usually it's election day votes that get counted first.
Right.
And you see the Republicans shoot ahead, and then the process of bailing and binding and unbinding all those mail-in votes.
Right.
And some states like Pennsylvania refuse to count the votes first, so you have to wait for all of that to come in. So in every election, and certainly a national election, you expect to see the Republican with a lead, but it's not really a lead. When you put together a jigsaw puzzle, it doesn't matter which piece you put in first. It ends up with the same image. So for us,
good analogy.
Who cares? But that's because no candidate had ever tried to avail themselves of this quirk in the election counting system. We had gone to pains, and I'm proud of the pains we went to make sure that we were informing viewers that this was going to happen, because the Trump campaign and the president had made it clear that they were going to try to exploit this anomaly. And we knew it was going to be bigger because the percentage of early votes was higher, right? We went from about 45% of the votes being early and absentee to, because of the pandemic, that increased by about 50%. So we knew it would be longer, we knew it would be more. So we wanted to keep telling viewers, hey, look, the number that you see here is sort of irrelevant because it's only a small percentage of these votes.
So this red mirage, that's really what you expected to happen on election night.
Happens every time.
Thank you, Mr. Stirewalt. Now, I'd like to play a clip of Attorney General Bill Barr, who also explains what was expected to happen on election night.
So they knew. They absolutely know it.
Right out of the box on election night, the president claimed that there was major fraud underway. I mean, this happened, as far as I could tell, before there was actually any potential of looking at evidence. And it seemed to be based on the dynamic that at the end of the evening, a lot of Democratic votes came in, which changed the vote counts in certain states. And that seemed to be the basis for this broad claim that there was major fraud. And I didn't think much of that because people had been talking for weeks, and everyone understood for weeks that that was going to be what happened on election night.
Wow. Everyone knew for weeks.
Mr. Stepien obviously could not be with us today, and it's proper for him to be with his wife as they welcome their child. But he also had discussions with the president about the red mirage, that is, that it would be a long night and that early votes would favor him, but that lots more votes would be counted over the course of the night and the days after. So let's play clip 1 from our interview with Mr. Stepien.
I recounted back to that conversation with him, in which I said, just like I said in 2016 was going to be a long night. I told him in 2020 that it was going to be a process again, as the early returns are going to be positive, and we're going to be watching the returns of ballots as they rolled in thereafter.
So is it fair to say you're trying to present what you thought would be a realistic picture of what might happen over the course of that night, being election night?
That night and the days that followed. Yeah, I always told the president the truth, and I think he expected that from me, and I told him it was going to be a process. It was going to be, we're going to have to wait and see how this turned out. So I just like I did in 2016, I did the same thing in 2020.
So let's watch a short clip of President Trump speaking after he received that information from his campaign advisors.
We want all voting to stop. We don't want them to find any ballots at 4 o'clock in the morning and add them to the list.
So when former President Trump said that, it contradicted what his advisors had warned would happen. We all know that mail-in ballots played an important role in the 2020 election. However, President Trump continuously discouraged mail-in voting. Mr. Stepien was so concerned about the president's position on mail-in voting that in the summer of 2020, he met with President Trump along with House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy. Let's play clip 4.
Meeting that was had, in particular, I invited Kevin McCarthy to join the meeting, he being of like mind on the issue with me, in which we made our case for why
democracy should
we
prevail.
believed mail-in voting,
again, the uncomfortable,
not to be a bad thing for his campaign.
The discomfort.
But the president's mind was made up, and you understand, how many times to, go to the well on a particular topic.
Yeah, I understand.
Jesus.
Tell me a little bit more about the argument that you and Mr. McCarthy made to the president in that meeting as to why it wasn't a bad thing that mail-in voting was available.
Largely two pillars to that argument, both of which I've previously mentioned. One, leaving a good deal to chance, pushing or urging your voters to vote only on election day leaves a lot to chance. That's A. And B, also previously mentioned, the fact that the Trump campaign, Republican National Committee, Republican Party, had an advantage of grassroots workers and volunteers on the ground that would allow, an advantage to enhance return rates of ballots that were mailed. Those were the two pillars of the argument.
Okay. I see. And what, if anything, do you recall Representative McCarthy saying during that meeting?
We were echoing the same argument. I mean, his words echoed mine, and vice versa on those two topics.
Mr. Stirewalt, you were at the decision desk at Fox News on election night, and you called Arizona early for President Biden, which was controversial. How did you make that call, and where did you think the race stood in the early hours of the next day?
Good question.
Well, it was really controversial to our competitors who we beat so badly by making the correct call first. Our decision desk was the best in the business, and I was very proud to be a part of it. Because we had partnered with the Associated Press and the National Opinion Research Center at the University of Chicago, thanks to my colleague and friend Arnon Mishkin, had built a wonderful device for forecasting the outcomes of elections. So we had a different set of data than our competitors did. We had more research.
Definitely very
and we
well
had a better
respected.
system, and we had a great team. So what you're waiting to see is, do the actual votes match up with the expectations in the poll? The real votes are testing the quality of your poll in targeted precincts and in targeted places. And let me tell you, our poll in Arizona was beautiful, and it was doing just what we wanted it to do, and it was cooking up just right. And at some point, and I forget exactly who, but at some point it became clear that Arizona was getting ready to make a call. So we, my boss, Bill Salmon, said we're not making any call until everybody says yes, because that was always our policy, unanimity. And you have to understand, in this room, you have, the best. People from academia, Democrats, Republicans, a broad cross-section of people who had worked together for a decade, who are really serious about this stuff. So we knew it would be a consequential call because it was one of 5 states that really mattered, right? Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona were the ones that we were watching. We knew it would be significant to call any one of those 5, but we already knew Trump's chances were very small and getting smaller based on what we had seen. So we were able to make the call early. We were able to beat the competition. We looked around the room, everybody says yay, and on we go. And by the time we found out how much everybody was freaking out and losing their minds over this call, we were already trying to call the next state. We had already moved on. We were to Georgia, we were to North Carolina. We were looking at these other states.
Bad energy.
So we thought we were pleased, but not surprised.
I see. After the election, as of November 7th, in your judgment, what were the chances of President Trump winning the election?
After that point?
Yes.
None.
Wow.
I mean, I guess it's always possible that you could have, a truckload of ballots be found somewhere, I suppose. But once you get into this space, ahead of today, I thought about what are the largest margins that could ever be overturned by a recount, and the normal kind of stuff that we heard Mike Pence talking about, sounding like a normal Republican that night when he said, we'll keep every challenge. Nothing like that. In a recount, you're talking about hundreds of votes.
Wow.
When we think about calling a race, one of the things that we would think about is it outside the margin of a recount? And when we think about that margin, we think about, in modern history, you're talking about 1,000 votes, 1,500 votes at the way outside. Normally, you're talking about hundreds of votes, maybe 300 votes that are going to change. So the idea that through any normal process in any of these states, remember, he had to do it thrice, right? He needed 3 of these states to change. And in order to do that, I mean, you're at an infant. You're better off to play the Powerball than to have that come.
Right.
On November 7th, the other major news outlets called the race for President Biden. Now, Mr. Stepien told the committee that he thought the odds were, and this is a quote, very, very, very bleak, and held a meeting with the president that same day. Let's show clip 8, video clip 8.
All right, starting to heat up.
I mean, with each day that wore on, I mean, the trajectory of the race, on election night, Trump ahead in many states. And as that week wore on, as the 3rd became the 4th, became the 5th, and so on and so forth, and the vote by mail ballots were tabulated, Trump's lead, grew more narrow, and in some places, Biden surpassed, Trump in the vote totals. So as the week wore on, as we paid attention to those numbers multiple times a day, internally, I was feeling less confident for sure.
It's hard to argue with math.
What was your view on the state of the election at that point?
Very, very, very bleak.
Very bleak.
It's
amazing that most Republicans still haven't looked into this obvious coup attempt.
The group that went over
they agree with it.
Outlined,
days are coming.
My belief in chances for success at this point, and then we pegged it at 5, maybe 10% based on recounts that either were automatically initiated or could be initiated based on realistic legal challenges, not all the legal challenges that eventually were pursued. But, you know, it was,
Your harebrained.
you know, my belief is that it was a very, very, I mean, 5 to 10%. It's not a very good, optimistic outlook.
Coup number 2. Yeah, if
Now,
they don't
as
get
President
prosecuted.
Trump and others
just a
continued to
dry
claim
run.
that the election was stolen, there were lawyers who were a part of the campaign lawyers, who were responsible for investigating the fraud claims. That includes Alex Cannon, who could not validate the claims that were being made, including those being made by the president. Let's roll video 15. 13.
This is an email. It's 2 emails, actually. The first is from Alex Cannon to you and Faith McPherson.
Okay.
And then you forward that email on to Mark Meadows, Justin Clark, and Jason Miller, the subject being AZ Federal ID Voters. If you look at the original email there, it says, Bill, we completed the AZ analysis you requested. I assume that's about Arizona.
Right, that makes sense.
And because of the substantial uncertainty surrounding the databases, this is a highly unreliable way to identify ineligible voters. Can you explain the task that you gave to Ms. Cannon for this Arizona analysis?
Sure. Previously, I described some of my frustration with some of the claims that people would throw at President Trump regarding, you need to look at this, this happened in this state or that happened in that state.
Okay.
And it would be, those would flow to us to look into. I talked about that before, I think.
Yep.
This is an example of that. I recall in Arizona, someone had thrown out, I believe this to be the claim, that there were thousands of illegal citizens.
Illegal citizens?
People not eligible to vote.
Okay.
Kind of cast their ballots in Arizona.
Okay.
Someone had thrown out that claim to President Trump.
Just a random claim?
And with, the margins being as close as they were, as I previously described, that could potentially matter.
Big
so
if true.
This wild claim is thrown out, which, on its face didn't seem, realistic or possible to me. I asked Alex to look at the claim.
Right.
And I haven't read this full email, but I recall the response to that. The reality of that was not illegal citizens voting in the election. I think it was like overseas voters voting in the election.
Something super normal.
So obviously, people who were eligible to vote.
Of course. And they would have shown up, like they would have been
When
mail.
these findings were passed up the chain to President Trump, he became frustrated and he replaced the campaign's legal team.
Nice.
Let's play clip 14.
Totally normal.
I think the president, it was during the second week where things like you displayed were occurring, where he was, growing increasingly unhappy with, his team, me less so because I was less involved at this point, but still me, growing increasingly unhappy with Justin Clark. And that kind of, paved the way for, Justin to be moved out and Mayor Giuliani to be moved in as the person in charge of, the legal side of the campaign and for all intents and purposes, the campaign at that point.
So the lawyers knew when he replaced him.
When Mr. Stepien became campaign manager, he was the second
campaign manager.
Trump campaign manager for the 2020 race, and there were only about 115 days until Election Day. So let's play the video.
I inherited a campaign that was, the day I was hired was, I believe, President Trump's low point in the 2020 daily average polling against President Biden. It was a campaign at a low point in the polls. It was structurally and fiscally deficient.
Falling over.
There was a great deal wrong with the campaign in both of those
Dang.
In both of those areas.
Shots fired.
So most of my day spent fixing and I think I took over with 115 days left in the campaign. Most of my time spent fixing the things that could be fixed.
Wow.
With 115 days left in the campaign.
Yikes. That's a realist.
Now, Mr. Stepien has been in the campaign field for a long time, and he worked for lots of different candidates and campaigns. He testified to this committee about his concerns given the claims that Mr. Giuliani and Ms. Powell and their team were making publicly. Let's play clip 15.
Okay, and was it important for you, Mr. Stepien, to sort of pull back just for your own professional reputation? You didn't want to be associated with some of what you were hearing from the Giuliani team and others that sort of stepped in the wake of your departure?
I didn't mind being categorized. There were two groups of them. We called them kind of my team and Rudy's team.
Okay.
I didn't mind being characterized as being part of Team Normal, as reporters, kind of started to do around that point in time.
Really? Right.
I said, hours ago, early on that, I've been doing this for a long time, 25 years, and I've spanned, political ideologies from Trump to McCain to Bush to Christie, and
these are all right-wingers.
I can work under a lot of circumstances for a lot of varied, candidates and politicians, but situation where, and I think along the way I've built up a pretty good, I hope, a good reputation for being honest and professional, and I didn't think what was happening was necessarily honest or professional at that point in time.
We can't have that.
That led to me stepping away.
Dang, an honest, upright Republican.
So
they do exist.
The president did get rid of Team Normal, and I'd like to play a clip showing that the president found the people he needed to perpetuate his claims of fraud.
Right. Yeah, that's the dodgy stuff.
They saw a big truck bringing in 100,000 ballots in garbage cans, in waste paper baskets, in cardboard boxes, and in shopping baskets. And every single one of them was for Biden, because they were being notified by Smartmatic in Frankfurt that Biden was way behind, and they better come up with a lot more ballots, and we can prove every single thing I just said.
And then they
didn't.
didn't.
You gave me the paper ballots, I could probably turn around each one of these states. I'm absolutely convinced if you let me examine each one of those ballots, I pull out enough.
Bro, really?
That were fraudulent, that it would shake the hell out of the country.
It can set and run an algorithm that probably ran all over the country to take a certain percentage of votes from President Trump and flip them to President Biden, which we might never have uncovered had the votes for President Trump not been so overwhelming in so many of these states that it broke the algorithm.
I remember that one of the things Mark said at some point was you can't show an actual vote was flipped, which I found at the time to be a remarkable assertion because
she doesn't understand the technology.
Because you don't have to have the gun to see the body lying on the floor bleeding out with 5 bullet holes in it was killed by a gun.
What they were proposing, I thought was nuts.
Wow.
And the theory was also completely nuts.
Amazing.
Right? I mean, it was
this
a
has gotten
combination
spicy.
of Italians, the Germans. I mean, different things have been floating around as to who was involved. I remember Hugo Chavez and the Venezuelan. She has an affidavit from somebody who says they
Does this
wrote
guy have a
software
bat?
in, something with the Philippines.
My guy's got a bat with the word justice on it. Oh my God.
Share, Mr. Kushner, your view of Mr. Giuliani. Did you ever share your perspective about him with the president?
I guess.
Come on, Soy Boy.
Yes.
Tell me what you said.
Basically, not the approach I would take if I was you.
Okay. And how did he react? How did President Trump react when you shared that view with him?
We said, I have confidence in Rudy.
think I had conversations with
Justice
probably
come at
all
the
of
end
our
of this
council
beer
who
bat.
signed up to assist on election day as they disengaged with the campaign. The general consensus was that the law firms were not comfortable making the arguments that Rudy Giuliani was making publicly.
Doing the
I
lies.
seem to recall that I had a similar conversation with most all of them.
I made it clear I did not agree with the idea of saying the election was stolen and putting out this stuff, which I told the president was bullshit.
Banging that drum.
And, you know, I didn't want to be a part of it, and that's one of the reasons that went into me deciding to leave when I did.
Even Sidney Powell, defending herself in a defamation lawsuit brought by Dominion Voting Systems, argued that, quote, no reasonable person would conclude that her statements were truly statements of fact. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
She herself admitted. Oh yeah,
I thank the
no one
witness
takes
for
it seriously.
joining us today. The first panel is now dismissed.
Okay, all right. It was pretty dry, but we learned some important stuff. Basically, that there were honest data brokers within the Republican Party, that they were summarily dismissed and rejected. One question.
Without objection, the chair recognizes the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Lofgren.
Oh yeah, Lofgren's next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last week, we presented the testimony of former Attorney General Bill Barr, who testified before this committee. Today, we present additional evidence, including his testimony that former President Trump started making claims of election fraud immediately after the election, and that Barr concluded the claims were untrue. Now, due to the length of Attorney General Barr's testimony, we're only going to include relevant portions at the hearing today. So let's play the video.
So Bill Barr sung. He sung like a canary.
In fact, when we received specific and credible allegations of fraud, made an effort to look into these to satisfy ourselves that they were without merit. And I was in the posture of trying to figure out, there was an avalanche of all these allegations of fraud that built up over a number of days, and it was like playing whack-a-mole because something would come out one day and then the next day it would be another issue. Also, I was influenced by the fact that all the early claims that I understood were completely bogus and silly and usually based on complete misinformation. And so I didn't consider the quality of claims right out of the box to give me any, feeling that there was really substance here.
Right.
For the first time since the election, the Attorney General spoke personally with the President on November 23rd, and this was at the White House. Let's play the video, please.
So on November 23rd, I hadn't spoken to the president since the election, and in fact, as I said, since the middle of October, roughly. And it was a little getting awkward because obviously he had lost the election and I hadn't said anything to him. And so Cipollone said, I think it's time you come over here. And so I came over to meet with the president in the Oval Office, and Meadows and Cipollone were there.
Interesting.
And the president, and this is leading up to this conversation with Kushner, the president said there had been major fraud and that as soon as the facts were out, the results of the election would be reversed. And he went on this for quite a while, as he's prone to do. And then he got to something that I was expecting, which is to say that apparently the Department of Justice doesn't think that it has a role of looking into these fraud claims. And I said, that has to be the campaign that raises that with the state. The department doesn't take side in elections, and the department is not an extension of your legal team. And our role is to investigate fraud, and we'll look at something if it's specific, credible, and could have affected the outcome of the election, and we're doing that. And it's just not, they're just not meritorious. They're not panning out. And as I walked out of the Oval Office, Jared was there with Dan Scavino, who ran the president's social media, and who I thought was a reasonable guy and believe is a reasonable guy. And I said, how long is he going to carry on with this stolen election stuff? Where's this going to go? And by that time, Meadows had caught up with me and leaving the office, and caught up with me and said that he said, look, I think that he's becoming more realistic and knows that there's a limit to how far he can take this. And then Jared said, yeah, we're working on this. We're working on it.
We're working on this. Eating those words.
Even after his attorney general told him his claims of election fraud were false, President Trump continued to promote these claims.
No reasonable person. No reasonable person.
I felt that things continued to deteriorate between the 23rd and the weekend of the 29th. And then on November 29th, he appeared on Maria Bartiromo's show, Sunday Futures, I believe it was.
Oh, God.
And he said that the department was missing in action.
Well, no, we had glitches where they moved thousands of votes from my account to Biden's account. And these are glitches. So they're not glitches, they're theft, they're fraud, absolute fraud. This election was over, and then they did dumps. They call them dumps, big massive
the dumps. Remember the dumps?
In Michigan and Pennsylvania.
Big dumps.
And all over. How the FBI and Department of Justice, I don't know, maybe they're involved, but how people are allowed to get away from this stuff with this stuff is unbelievable.
Fox News laundering the lies once again.
Spurred by what he saw, Barr told the Associated Press on December 1st that there was no evidence of election fraud. And immediately after Attorney General Barr's statement went public, Mr. Trump berated and he nearly fired Barr. But Barr persisted in telling the president that there was no evidence to support the fraud claims.
This got under my skin, but I also felt it was time for me to say something. So I set up a lunch with the AP reporter, Mike Balsamo, and I told him at lunch, I made this statement, that to date we have not seen fraud on a scale that could have affected a different outcome in the election. I had a later meeting scheduled at the White House at 3 o'clock with Meadows. This was previously scheduled, so I knew this was going to come up, and I went over there and I told my secretary that I thought I would probably be fired and told not to go home. I mean, not to go back to my office. So I said, you might have to pack up for me. And so when I got over there, I met with the chief of staff. He said the president was angry. He didn't really get into the issue of the fraud. And then I went up to Pat Cipollone's office and we were talking with each other. And word came down that he wanted us both to go to the Oval. And the president was as mad as I've ever seen him, and he was trying to control himself. And the president said, well, this is killing me. You didn't have to say this. You must have said this because you hate Trump. You hate Trump. And then he raised the big vote dump, as he called it, in Detroit. And that, he said people saw boxes coming into the counting station at all hours of the morning and so forth. And I explained to him that at that point, I knew the exact number of precincts in Detroit. I think it was 630 something. I said, Mr. President, there are 630 precincts in Detroit, and unlike elsewhere in the state, they centralized the counting process, so they're not counted in each precinct. They're moved to counting stations, and so the normal process would involve boxes coming in at all different hours. So there's nothing. And I said,
suspicious
did anyone
about
point out to you? Did all the people complaining about it point out to you actually did better in Detroit than you did last time? I mean, there's no indication of fraud in Detroit.
Right.
And
the numbers are within.
I told him that the stuff that his people were shoveling out to the public was bullshit. I mean, that the claims of fraud were bullshit.
Damn.
And he was indignant about that. And I reiterated that they'd wasted a whole month on these claims on the Dominion voting machines, and they were idiotic claims.
Yep.
And
absolutely.
I specifically raised the Dominion voting machines, which I found to be among the most disturbing allegations. Disturbing in the sense that I saw absolutely zero basis for the allegations, but they were made in such a sensational way that they obviously were influencing a lot of people, members of the public.
Dang.
That there was this systemic corruption in the system, and that their votes didn't count, and that these machines controlled by somebody else were actually determining it, which was complete nonsense.
Wow.
And it was being laid out there, and I told them that it was crazy stuff, and they were wasting their time on that.
Oh my goodness.
And it was doing a grave disservice to the country.
Damn. Bill Barr, hero of the Republic.
The very next day, the president released a video rehashing some of the very same claims that his chief law enforcement officer had told him were, quote, nonsense.
Bullshit. Oh, come on, nonsense. You mean bullshit.
Here's an example. This is Michigan. At 6:31 in the morning.
Oh, fuck, look at this shit.
A vote dump of 149,772 votes came in.
Look at this vote dump.
Unexpectedly. We were winning by a lot. That batch was received in horror.
From
we have
the
a
Oval
company
Office.
that's very suspect. Its name is Dominion.
Whoa.
With the turn of a dial.
I don't remember this.
With the change of a chip, you can press a button for Trump.
Yo.
And the vote goes to Biden. What kind of a system is this?
Whoa. I don't remember him saying
Barr
that.
again told the president that there was nothing to these claims on December 14th.
Wow.
When I walked in, sat down, he went off on a monologue saying that there was now definitive evidence involving fraud through the Dominion machines.
Definitive
evidence. A report
evidence.
had been prepared by a very reputable cybersecurity firm.
The Cyber Ninjas.
Identified as Allied Security Operations Group, and he held up the report, and then he asked that a copy of it be made for me. And while a copy was being made, he said, this is absolute proof that the Dominion machines were rigged.
Wow.
The report means that I'm going to have a second term.
Wow.
And then he gave me a copy of the report, and as he talked more and more about it, I sat there flipping through the report and looking through it. And to be frank, it looked very amateurish to me. Didn't have the credentials of the people involved, but I didn't see any real qualifications. And the statements were made very conclusory, like, these machines were designed to, engage in fraud or something to that
What
effect.
the
but I
fuck?
didn't see any supporting information for it.
Oh my goodness.
And I was somewhat demoralized because I thought, boy, if he really believes this stuff, he has, lost contact with he's become detached from reality if he really believes this stuff.
Holy shit.
On the other hand, when I went into this and would, tell him how crazy some of these allegations were, there was never an indication of interest in what the actual facts were. In my opinion then, and my opinion now, is that the election was not stolen by fraud. And I haven't seen anything since the election that changes my mind on that, including the 2000 Mules movie.
The 2000 Mules movie?
Well, maybe you can assess that 2000 Mules, and people are talking about that.
Well, I mean, just in a nutshell, I just think the GBI was unimpressed with it, and I was similarly unimpressed with it because I think I was holding my fire on that to see what the photographic evidence was, because I thought, well, hell, if they have a lot of photographs of the same person dumping a lot of ballots in different boxes, that's hard to explain. So I wanted to see what the photographic evidence was, but the cell phone data is singularly unimpressive. I mean, it basically, if you take 2 million cell phones and figure out where they are physically in a big city like Atlanta or wherever.
Okay, sure.
Just by definition, you're going to find many hundreds of them have passed by and spent time in the vicinity of these boxes.
Right.
And the premise that if you go by a box, 5 boxes or whatever it was, that's a mule is just indefensible.
Oh my goodness!
By definition, you're going to have hundreds of this. I mean, I saw one contractor said we figured out that our truck alone would account for 6 cell phone signals. This was some kind of contractor, and our route would take us by these things on a regular basis. So but then when the movie came out,
Dinesh D'Souza,
I think the photographic evidence in it was completely I mean, there was a little bit of it, but it was lacking. It didn't establish widespread
interesting
illegal harvesting. The other thing is people don't understand is that it's not clear that even if you can show harvesting, that changes the results of the election. The courts are not going to throw out votes and then figure out what votes were harvested and throw them out. You'd still the burden on the challenging party to show that illegal votes were cast. Votes were the result of undue influence or bribes or
and we've seen some Republicans get caught for that.
Non-compos mentis. But absent that evidence, I just didn't see courts throwing out votes anyway. I felt that before the election, it was possible to talk sense to the president.
Yikes.
And while you sometimes had to engage in a big wrestling match with him, that it was possible to keep things on track. But I felt that after the election, he didn't seem to be listening, and I didn't think it was. That I was inclined not to stay around if he wasn't listening to advice from me or his other cabinet secretaries.
Could have tried to invoke the 25th Amendment.
So on December 14th, Barr quit. Now, the Attorney General wasn't the only person who told the president that his claims were false. Other officials and close advisors told him the same thing.
Other than try to address a counterfactual or a hypothetical, let me just say there were instances where the president would say, people are telling me this, or I've heard this, or I saw on television.
Classic Trump speak.
This impropriety in Atlanta or Pennsylvania.
People are saying.
And we were in a position to say, our people have already looked at that, and we know that you're getting bad information. That's not correct. It's been demonstrated to be incorrect from our point of view, and been debunked.
A month and a half or so after the election day.
Debunked is a 4-letter word for conservatives.
Various allegations of fraud were discussed, and Eric and Pat didn't, told the group, the president included, that none of those allegations had been substantiated to the point where they could be the basis for any litigation.
Even Pat Cipollone?
Challenge to the election.
Interesting. He seemed like a total lemming.
President Trump's own vice president and his top advisors also knew that there wasn't evidence to support the claims that the president was making.
Anyone else other than Mr. Meadows who asked you about the status outside of your legal group, Mr. Morgan and the others you mentioned, anyone else who asked you the status of what you were finding in your assessment of it?
Yes, sir.
Who's that?
Peter Navarro.
Ooh.
When did you talk to Mr. Navarro?
Mid-November.
That glasses push.
Around the same time as Mr. Meadows?
Yes, sir.
And tell me about that conversation.
I recall him asking me questions about Dominion and maybe some other categories of allegations of voter fraud. And I remember telling him that I didn't believe the Dominion allegations because I thought the hand recount in Georgia would resolve any issues with a technology problem and with Dominion or Dominion flipping votes.
Right. They did like more than one.
And I mentioned at that time that the CISA, Chris Krebs, had recently released a report saying that the election was secure. And I believe Mr. Navarro accused me of being an agent of the deep state working with Chris Krebs against the president. And I never took another phone call from Mr. Navarro.
Wow.
Anyone else
I wouldn't either.
Mr. Meadows, Mr. Navarro, Mr. Hirschman that you had discussions with inquiring about what you were finding in your review of the allegations that were pouring in?
I believe I had about a 15-second conversation with the vice president about it as well.
When was that?
During one of the visits to the White House. I don't know which one. I think it was the first one in November. I had met him briefly at the campaign, and he remembered me and saw me. And he asked what I was doing on the campaign, and I told him that, you know, we were looking into some of the issues related to voter fraud. And he asked me, I don't remember his exact words, but he asked me if we were finding anything. And I said that I didn't believe we were finding it, or I was not personally finding anything sufficient to alter the results of the election. And he thanked me. That was our interaction.
At a later hearing, you'll hear live testimony from the former acting Deputy Attorney General of the Department of Justice, Rich Donahue. But now I'd like to play a portion of his testimony.
Okay, this is a new name for me.
I tried to, again, put this in perspective and to try to put it in very clear terms to the president. And I said something to the effect of, sir, we've done dozens of investigations, hundreds of interviews. The major allegations are not supported by the evidence developed. We've looked at Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Nevada.
There it is.
We're doing our job. Much of the info you're getting is false.
Wow.
And then I went into, for instance, this thing from Michigan, this report about 68% error rate. Reality is it was only 0.0063% error rate, less than 1 in 15,000.
How do you get that wrong? Like, literally don't understand math?
He said, okay, fine, but what about the others?
Okay,
and again,
fine.
This gets back to the point that there were so many of these allegations that when you gave him a very direct answer on one of them,
he found another.
Fight us on it, but he would move to another allegation.
Interesting.
So then I talked about a little bit about the Pennsylvania truck driver. This is another allegation that had come up. And this claim was by a truck driver who believed, perhaps honestly, that he had transported an entire tractor-trailer truck full of ballots from New York to Pennsylvania. And this was, again, out there in the public.
Interesting.
And discussed.
Right. Another lie.
And I essentially said, look, we looked at that allegation. We looked at both ends, both the people who load the truck and the people who unload the truck.
Okay.
And that allegation was not supported by the evidence. Again, he said, okay.
Interesting.
And then he said, no, I didn't mention that one. What about the others?
Cope.
And I said, okay, well, with
copes.
regard to Georgia, we looked at the tape, we interviewed the witnesses. There is no suitcase. The president kept fixating on this suitcase that supposedly had fraudulent ballots, and that the suitcase was rolled out from under the table.
No kidding.
And I said, no, sir, there is no suitcase. You can watch that video over and over. There is no suitcase. There is a wheeled bin where they carry the ballots, and that's just how they move ballots around that facility. There's nothing suspicious about that at all.
Oh, my goodness. Make it stop.
I told them that there was no multiple scanning of the ballots. One part of that allegation was that they were taking one ballot and scanning it through 3 or 4 or 5 times to rack up votes, presumably for Vice President Biden. I told them that the video did not support that.
Right. There's just too much evidence in this era.
Then he
the
went
information
off
era.
on double voting, the top of the next page.
Oh,
he
God.
said, dead people are voting.
Dead people are voting.
Indians are getting paid to vote. He meant people on Native American reservations.
Racist shit.
He said there's lots of fraud going on.
Lots of fraud.
Told him flat out that much of the information he's getting is false and or just not supported by the evidence.
That's
we look
the
at
smoking
the
gun.
allegations, but they don't pan out.
Again, another smoking gun.
Mr. Barr and his advisors were not the only ones who determined that the president's allegations regarding Dominion voting machines were false. So, Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to include in the record of this hearing reports issued by the Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, otherwise known as CISA, that addressed and rejected the claims of manipulation of voting machines in the 2020 election.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also ask unanimous consent to include in the record a report prepared by the Michigan Senate Oversight Committee that disproved claims of election fraud in Michigan, as well as a statement by 59 of the country's leading election security scientists, noting the absence of any credible evidence that the 2020 election had been altered through technical compromise, and 5 other reports from organizations and individuals confirming there was no widespread fraud in the 2020 election or describing the spread of the former president's lies.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Okay. Is that part 1?
Pursuant to the order of the committee for today, the chair declares the committee in recess for a period of approximately 10 minutes.
10-minute recess. Okay. Now, can I stick around for the second half? Oh, is it worth it? I should probably get my day started. Dang, this is definitely taking a lot longer than I thought it would be. What do you think, chat? Should I hang out, cover the second half? Is it worth it? There's been some spicy stuff. There's been some stuff that's been boring as hell. Oh my god. I don't know. What do you think? What do you think so far? What do you think? Do you think they got him? Is this it? Is this what stopping an American autocrat looks like? Really kind of sort of dry hearings where it's only kind of juicy because, you know, like the attorney general is saying, yeah, at a certain point, I thought the president lost his mind. I didn't know. It was just, so I quit. I know, right? Like, it's so weird to hear Bill Barr talk in such a plain and casual way, and it's just like, yeah. And so my normal human response is just to be like, okay, I guess this is not it for me, dog. You know, we got some professional and creative differences. I think we got to part ways. And everybody else is like, you were the top cop just listening to the president pursue like a big lie to like, what's going on here? Like, oh my goodness. So it's been pretty spicy. It's been pretty spicy stuff. I'm curious what the coverage has been like around the internet. I mean, certainly Washington Post has been all right. I just can't imagine that the right wing is not like losing its absolute shit over this. Like, dude, just like, yeah, so can you pack my office? Like, the part I don't understand is how can Bill Barr be saying such stuff straightforwardly, very calmly, but also aware that the president's like lost his goddamn mind? That's 25th Amendment shit. Like, shouldn't you be organizing? I mean, like, guys, I don't know if, did you see Paradigm's tweet, like 8 minutes before yours? Was it something like caught in 4K or something like that? Like Republicans caught in 4K? It's delicious? Yeah, I bet. I was looking for a GIF to reply to it, and it's the Simpsons, filming this crime spree was the greatest idea. But I couldn't find the GIFs, and I'm streaming, so I gave up on it. Just like fiercely trying to get a banger tweet out while I'm like covering the fall of the American Empire. Just like, oh, okay, this is fine and normal, everybody. This is totally what I hoped I would grow up in. Yeah, Paradigm's funny. He's good. He's good shit. When he went live, I was actually kind of disappointed I didn't see January 6th in the thing, but I guess he came around to it. I don't know how you look away from this stuff. It's a bit dry, but it's also like, damn, it's like, yo, America's going through some shit, and even if this plays out perfectly well, that you know, like they do criminal charges, and Trump does go to jail, I guess, or something. I don't know, like, I still see that there's going to be another tyrant that picks up where he left off. This can't be anything but terrifying and awful for like the government to try to investigate a previous president. Bad time, man. Just a bad time. And also, like, the cultural position that the president has, and this massive like victory by the Supreme Court over Roe v. Wade that's coming up soon. Oh my god, the culture wars are gonna get hot. Oh yeah, you cracking a pint? Are you getting your drink on? Is that what that means? Loud Tyrant Youth. We should schedule a watch of this 2000 Mules. I got it up here. Let me just bring that up. It looks redonkulous. It looks absolutely ridiculous. I don't even know. I bet you couldn't even watch this on YouTube because you'd probably get like clapped for conspiracy theories or something. But here it is. No, you said the next tyrant? Oh yeah, of course. It's your time. It's your time. Are you 35 yet? I think that's the minimum age you gotta be to take over the American Empire, to sit on the seat drenched in blood. Oh god, the seat of the American Empire. Damn, another decade? Yeah, well, that's good, because that's about how much time you need to shitpost on Twitter before, you know, you've gotten your PhD, you know, in twitology. So yeah, look at this nonsense. This is a Dinesh D'Souza video. If you ever like go on a date and someone's like, yeah, I've been really into Dinesh D'Souza, it's just like, okay, all right, we're getting out of here. We're pulling the ripcord. This is Obama's America, everybody. 2016, from the creator of 2016, Obama's America. Comes 2000 Mules. Like, geez, these people, do they even understand the words coming out of their mouths? I don't even know. My goodness. Dinesh D'Souza as himself. There's Sebastian Gorka, of course. Charlie Kirk was in this. Larry Elder. Debbie D'Souza, so like his wife, was in this. Dennis Prager was in this. Yo, oh man. This kind of might be Stacey Abrams. Oh, because they're using the footage. Jacob Hyman as the mule. Like, what? Yeah, this is a who's who of conspiracy theorists and right-wingers. This might be a fun Discord watch. I don't know if it'd be mind-numbing and terrifying, but yeah, we could all like get on Discord for an evening, maybe like a Sunday afternoon, and watch 2000 Mules. That could be fun with some good fan service. All right, let's see what's going on here. People are shuffling a boot. Yeah, so I don't know. Do you think this is gonna matter? This is the first of 3 this week. When's the next one? Committee schedule. Yeah, and this has been a fun stream. This has been a fun stream for sure. Okay, what's the next one? Scheduled dates. Perfect. Okay, the first one was 90 minutes, so I thought we'd be in that ballpark. Dang, this is going on long. Shaheesh. Oh, I guess I could show you something cool. Let me show you something cool. That's always a fun way to pass time. I'm going to a concert tomorrow, and I'm gonna go see these fine folk. Check this out. Oh my God, chat, this is so cool.
Back in time! Flooding the future, betrayed by the notion of a future, redistributing each minute of the future, occupying the future, detaining the future at the border, drilling into the future, a refugee fleeing the notion of itself, downsizing the future, precarious future, rehabilitating the future, unaddicted to the future, bailing out the future, abdicating the future, recasting the future, insoluble future, tenet of the future, tuition from the future from the fugitive, from the fugitive, from the past, robot future with no jobs left, post-apocalyptic few in the future, people are idling, future traveling back, possible future, undoing a bleak, future, a new beginning, future, a new being, rent the future that belongs to no one, recycle the future, radio half light of the future, blood in the future, betrayed by the no of a future, redistribute each minute of the future, occupying the future, detain the future at the border, drill into the future, precarious future, rehab, 200 gets to ache, 200 gets to arrive, 200 gets to inherit, 200 gets to strive, 200 gets to pass, 200 gets to port, 200 gets to sleep, 200 gets to exist, 200 gets to ache, 200 gets to arrive, 200 gets to inherit, 200 gets to strive.
Oh, I'm so excited. It is a super group. An absolute super group. So like, I recognize 3 of the members. The dude on the right is Kai Kello. Let me just pull up a clip where you can actually see him. Yeah, right there. So him with the cool haircut. He's like one of Canada's better poets. Well, that's what I was thinking about the. I think that's a bass sax. Is that a bass sax or baritone? I can't tell. I think it's a bass sax. He's also super neat, and the time signature is just like da 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 da. Tanya Evanson, Tanya Evanson. She's a poet that's like a friend of the Throw Poetry Collective. She's really based and cool. She does like Sufi spinning, so she'll like spin to some dancing. I've been like wanting to go for a long time. And then the last member is Jasun. He was part of this incredible band called Community, and Preach, who has like hung out with us a few times and is out on Twitch. Shout out Forever Preach. What is it? Forever? Oh God, I don't remember what it is. Yeah, he's really based too. So Jasun was the rhythmic center. He was the one who basically was one of the founding members and like super based, really great guy, incredible drummer. And what Community did is they made up the music on the spot right then and there, and they were just like really practiced with it. And you'd see like singers like get together and figure out like what the hook was, and like then you'd have a poet go up and do their thing. I like performed with them once, and I was like still really young and still finding my feet, so it wasn't the best track, but really great band. And they kind of disappeared for a pandemic, so now I know where Jasun is. Like, oh my God. So extremely excited. Tomorrow's my last class, and I'm gonna like leave it early just to like go see these fine folk, because yeah, they're absolutely based.
Gonna push this big lie too far, and then Trump pushing it far anyway. You know,
okay,
that
back to the footage.
Maybe it was reported, but hearing, you know, a participant in it describe on video what it was like, and this sort of.
No, honestly, this past week, I've just been like going out to shows and like having a blast. The city's coming back to life, so it's really nice to see. And Montreal like blocks off a lot of streets so that you can kind of hang out and get food. So everywhere you look, you're like running into like a very lovely, kind scene. And I haven't been to a concert in, I don't know, months now. I went to a concert not too long ago. It was it was a really good band. Bad Not Good. That was a really great concert. But I was just like, I was just so depressed. Just went there by myself, and just it was like such an intense moment because COVID was still pretty hot, and like it was a room full of people, like absolutely packed house. Everyone wearing their masks, but packed. I just could not relax. I was so stressed out, just like trying to enjoy some really bizarre, crazy jazz, and yeah, just could not hack it. And so I'm hoping I'm in a better headspace for tomorrow. You know, I got like a final project to do. I might have a cute date this weekend, which would be really exciting. And yeah, I know what's going on with work. I actually, you know, have an exit plan, you know. It's gonna be good. It's gonna be good. Yeah, I've got lots of work to do for music, which is a bit stressful, but I want to try to record a bunch of songs, intro and outro music for the stream, and then start working on getting my album together, and especially tear down the statues. But look, January 6th committee's popping back on. Let's listen in. Skip ahead a few seconds.
For the Northern District of
Perfect.
Georgia.
Perfect.
Mr. Smith is a former city commissioner for the city of Philadelphia, where he served for more than 10 years. Mr. Ginsburg is one of the leading election law attorneys in the country and has represented Republican presidential candidates in election litigation dating back to 2000, where he represented George W. Bush in the Bush v. Gore litigation.
It's all been Republicans.
I will now swear in our witnesses.
I'm pretty sure they've only brought up
Please stand
Republicans,
and raise your right hand.
conservatives.
Do you swear or affirm?
It's going to be pretty hard to say that these people were like, you know, they're all rhinos, like every single one of them. Like, I don't know how they're going to try to escape this. I'm pretty sure they're all Republicans in some shape or another.
Let the record reflect the witnesses answered in the affirmative. Pursuant to Section 5C8 of House Resolution 503, I now recognize the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Lofgren, for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before the break, I think you all heard Mr. Barr and Mr. Donahue talk about the false claims that Mr. Trump and his supporters made about suitcases of fake ballots.
The suitcases.
We have a witness here today who thoroughly investigated that issue.
Nice.
Mr. Pack, I want to thank you for appearing before us today. You were appointed by President Trump to serve as a U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Georgia, and you served from 2017 until January of 2021. You were the lead federal prosecutor there and worked for the Department of Justice under then Attorney General Bill Barr. Now, were you ever asked by Attorney General Barr to investigate claims of voter fraud in the 2020 election? And if so, what were those claims?
Okay, good question.
Thank you, Congressman Lofgren. Thank you for the question. Approximately December 4th, I believe, of 2020, Attorney General Barr and I had a conversation about an unrelated case to the case at issue. At the end of the conversation, Mr. Barr had asked me if I had seen a certain videotape that was being reported in the news where Mr. Giuliani, in a Senate subcommittee hearing that was held the day before, May 3rd,
right,
showed a videotape of a purportedly a security tape at the State Farm Arena in Atlanta, which is also in Fulton County, in the city of Atlanta.
Okay.
I'm sorry, city of, yes.
So some security.
At the time, Mr. Barr asked me that he had made a public statement that he had not seen any widespread election fraud that would question the outcome of the election. And because of the videotape and the serious allegation that Mr. Giuliani was making with respect to the suitcase full of ballots purported in the video, he asked me to find out what I could about it, because he had envisioned that in some days after our call that he was going to go to the White House for a meeting, and then that issue might come up.
Right.
He asked me to make it a priority to get to the bottom of, just try to substantiate the allegation made by Mr. Giuliani.
So he made it up and then asked someone to fill in.
Thank you. I understand the Georgia Secretary of State's office investigated those State Farm Arena allegations and didn't find any evidence of fraud. What did you find when your office conducted its own investigation?
We found that the suitcase full of ballots, the alleged black suitcase that was being seen pulled from under the table, was actually an official lockbox where ballots were kept safe.
Okay.
We found out that
So
there was a mistake in terms of a misunderstanding that they were done counting ballots or tallying ballots for the night, and the partisan watchers that was assigned by each of the respective parties were announced to send home. But once they realized the mistake, someone from the Secretary of State's office had indicated that, no, we're not done for the night. You need to go ahead and continue counting. So once they packed up the lockbox full of ballots, they brought back the official ballot box again and continued to tally the ballots from the lockbox.
That's pretty simple.
Unfortunately, during the Senate hearing, Mr. Giuliani only played a clip that showed them pulling out the official ballot box from under the table and referring to that as a smoking gun of a fraud in Fulton County. But in actuality, in review of the entire video, it showed that that was actually an official ballot box that was kept underneath the tables. And then we saw them pack up because of the announcement that they thought they were done for the night. And then once the announcement was made that you should continue counting, they brought the ballot box out.
That's it?
And
That's all
they
it was?
continued to count.
They just thought they were leaving early?
The FBI interviewed the individuals that are depicted in the videos. That purportedly were double, triple counting of the ballots, and determined that nothing irregular happened in the counting, and the allegations made by Mr. Giuliani were false.
Nice.
Thank you very much. I'd like to play again a testimony from Mr. Donahue, who appeared before the committee before today.
Mr. Donahue, we talked at some length about whether or not the White House or the president was informed about the Antrim report. On the result of the investigations, the interviews that have gone on Fulton County, how would those results have been communicated to the White House, to the president?
I don't know how they were initially communicated. I do know that they came up in subsequent conversations with the president, and Dag Rose and I essentially told him, we looked into that, and it's just not true.
Okay, so he wasn't.
So he wasn't.
Informed.
Yeah, that's the key question.
I told the president myself that several times in several conversations, that these allegations about ballots being smuggled in a suitcase and run through the machine several times, it was not true. That we looked at, we looked at the video, we interviewed the witnesses, it was not true.
So from every corner.
Mr. Pack, after you left the U.S. Attorney's Office on January 4th, 2021, did the next U.S. Attorney there, I think Mr. Trump's personal pick, Bobby Christine, did he investigate any remaining claims of fraud? And if so, did he find any evidence that supported the president's claims of voter fraud?
It is my understanding that Mr. Christine continued any investigations that were pending at the time of my departure, but he was unable to find any evidence of fraud that affected the outcome of the election.
So after investigating the president's and Mr. Giuliani's claims about voter fraud in Georgia, is it your view today that there was no evidence of widespread fraud sufficient to undermine confidence in the outcome of the election in Georgia?
That is correct.
Thank you, Mr. Pack. And I want to thank you also for the service that you've given to our...
This is white privilege. You know, the ability to just make random baseless claims, and it takes several years of work in a committee hearing to unpack your bullshit. Like, that's ridiculous.
The General discussed these allegations at some length.
The idea, the president has repeatedly suggested that there was some kind of outpouring of unexpected votes in inner city areas like Philadelphia. As recently as January 13th, when he walked off the NPR set, he was asked by the interviewer, what's your evidence of fraud? And he said, more people voted in Philadelphia than there were voters. And that was absolute rubbish. The turnout in Philadelphia was in line with the state's turnout. And in fact, it was not as impressive as many suburban counties. And there was nothing strange about the Philadelphia turnout. It wasn't like there was all these unexpected votes that came out in Philadelphia. So, I think once you actually look at the votes, and then there's an obvious explanation. For example, in Pennsylvania, Trump ran weaker than the Republican ticket generally. He ran weaker than two of the state candidates. He ran weaker than the congressional delegation running for federal Congress, and he ran weaker than the Republican, I think. I haven't looked at this recently, but he generally was a weak element on the Republican ticket. So that does not suggest that the election was stolen by fraud.
How about Pennsylvania and Bill McSwain? We were talking to the U.S. Attorney in Philadelphia about an alleged discrepancy between the number of absentee ballots issued and the number of ballots cast.
Right. So that was one of the big ones for a period of time. I think that was raised at Gettysburg by Giuliani or something like that. But it kept on being repeated, and I found it annoying because it didn't seem that it was right. So I called McSwain, and he got back to me. He said, no, the problem is that Mastriano threw out this number, and what he did was he mixed apples and oranges. He took the number of applications for the Republican primary, and he compared it to the number of absentee votes cast in the general election. But once you actually go and look and compare apples to apples, there's no discrepancy.
Oh my goodness.
And
so they were morons.
That's one of the I think at some point I covered that with the president.
We have another witness here today who has detailed knowledge about the election process in Philadelphia. Mr. Schmidt, at the time of the 2020 presidential election, you were serving as the only Republican member of Philadelphia's three-member city commission, which is responsible for overseeing elections throughout the city. Is that correct?
That's correct, Congressperson.
So President Trump made numerous claims regarding fraudulent voting practices in Philadelphia, including the claim that dead people were voting. In fact, Mr. Giuliani told Pennsylvania state legislators that 8,000 dead people voted in Pennsylvania.
Super normal.
You investigated those claims of voter fraud. Can you tell us what you found?
Not only was there not evidence of 8,000 dead voters voting in Pennsylvania, there wasn't evidence of 8.
Whoa.
We took seriously every case that was referred to us, no matter how fantastical, no matter how absurd, and took every one of those seriously, including these.
As it turns out, even Mr. Trump's campaign lawyers knew that the dead voter claims weren't valid.
I guess the crooks in Philadelphia are disappointed in this. They only submitted 8,021 ballots from dead people,
so
mail-in ballots for dead people. Probably easier for dead people to submit mail-in ballots than it is to vote in person.
Rudy was at this stage of his life and the same ability to manage things at this level.
Talking about him like a dog.
And obviously, I think Bernie Kerik publicly said it. They never proved the allegations that they were making, and they were trying to develop.
Mr. Schmidt, on November 11th, 2020, President Trump tweeted about you, saying, and here's a quote, "A guy named Al Schmidt, a Philadelphia commissioner and so-called Republican, or Rhino, is being used big time by the fake news media to explain how honest things were with respect to the election in Philadelphia. He refuses to look at a mountain of corruption, dishonesty. We win." As a result of that tweet and the CNN interview you gave where you stated the dead voter claims in Pennsylvania were false, you and your staff were subjected to disturbing threats. Can you tell us about that?
Oh, wow.
The threats prior to that tweet, and on some level it feels almost silly to talk about a tweet, but we can really see the impact that they have, because prior to that, the threats were pretty general in nature.
Okay.
Corrupt election officials in Philadelphia are going to get what's coming to them.
Okay.
You're what the Second Amendment is for. You're walking into the lion's den, all sorts of things like that.
Right.
After the president tweeted at me by name, calling me out the way that he did, the threats became much more specific, much more graphic, and included not just me by name, but included members of my family by name, their ages, our address, pictures of our home.
Holy
just
shit.
every bit of detail that you could imagine. That was what changed with that tweet.
Yo, that's terrifying.
Behind me are redacted threats that you received, that you provided to the committee. Now, we redacted portions of the text to protect your family. Mr. Schmidt, I think I speak for all of my colleagues when I say we are deeply sorry for what you and your loved ones have been through.
Whoa, this is scary.
And I also want to thank you for your service to your country and for standing up for the rule of law. I want to thank both Mr. Pack and Mr. Schmidt for their service, their testimony, and for standing up for the rule of law.
So it's like an example of
Now,
Trump whipping up the crowd to direct anger towards a person. Interesting. Like setting
the courts
up.
in our country provide a legitimate venue for campaigns to challenge what they view as irregular election practices. Now, courts have the final say on how the law applies to those challenges. We have a renowned legal expert here to address the Trump campaign's activities in court. Mr. Ginsburg, you spent your entire career representing Republicans in election-related litigation. You served as the National Counsel on Republican presidential campaigns in 2000, in 2004, and in 2012.
He looks like that actor in Better Call Saul.
You played a key role in the 2000 Florida recount that led to the Supreme Court's decision in Bush v. Gore. You served as the co-chair of the Presidential Commission on Election Administration. I think it's fair to say you're the most prominent Republican lawyer who's litigated in the election field. Now, you've analyzed the Trump campaign's litigation pretty carefully. What's the normal process for post-election litigation? How is the Trump campaigns different from the kinds of post-election litigation you've been involved in and know about?
In the normal course of things, any campaign on the night of the election and the days after will do a couple of different things. One is that they'll analyze precinct results to look for abnormalities in the results, and they'll send people to those precincts to ask more questions. Secondly, all campaigns will have poll watchers and poll workers and observers in the polling place. And so campaigns will talk to those people if they saw any irregularities that could cause problems in the election. Now, the Trump campaign talked pre-election about having 50,000 poll workers. So presumably, they did have eyes on the ground in all these places. And so in the normal course of things, a campaign will analyze the reports that come in. Trump campaign had a couple of basic problems, however. Number one, the 2020 election was not close. In 2000, that was 537 and close. In this election, the most narrow margin was 10,000 something in Arizona, and you just don't make up those sorts of numbers in recounts. And when the claims of fraud and irregularities were made, you've heard very compelling testimony from Mr. Stepien, from Matt Morgan, from Alex Cannon about those claims and how they didn't believe them. And so that put the Trump campaign on sort of a process of bringing cases without the actual evidence that you have to have in which the process is designed to bring out.
Right. So they just
So are you aware of any instance in which a court found the Trump campaign's fraud claims to be credible?
No, there was never that instance.
Nope.
In all the cases that were brought, and I've looked at the more than 60 that include more than 180 counts. And no, the simple fact is that the Trump campaign...
We knew about that part, that none of the cases, but now we get to see from the inside that they knew it too.
62 post-election lawsuits filed by the Trump campaign and his allies between November 4th, 2020 and January 6th, 2021. Those cases resulted in 61 losses and only a single victory, which actually didn't affect the outcome for either candidate. Despite those 61 losses, President Trump and his allies claim that the courts refused to hear them out, and as a result, they never had their day in court. Mr. Ginsburg, what do you say about the claims that Mr. Trump wasn't given an opportunity to provide the evidence they had of voter fraud? Did they in fact, did they have their day in court?
They did have their day in court. About half of those cases that you mentioned were dismissed at the procedural stage for a lack of standing. The proper people didn't bring the case, or there wasn't sufficient evidence and it got dismissed on a motion to dismiss. But in the other, there was discussion of the merits that was contained in the complaints. And in no instance did a court find that the charges of fraud were real. And it's also worth noting that even if the Trump campaign complained that it did not have its day in court, there have been post-election reviews in each of the 6 battleground states that could have made a difference. And those ranged from the somewhat farcical Cyber Ninjas case in Arizona to the Michigan Senate report that was mentioned earlier, the hand recount in Georgia that Mr. Pack addressed. And in each one of those instances, there was no credible evidence of fraud produced by the Trump campaign or his supporters.
Thank you.
That's a bingo.
You know, as Mr. Ginsburg has explained, there are no cases where the Trump campaign was able to convince a court that there was widespread fraud or irregularities in the 2020 election. Over and over, judges appointed by Democrats and Republicans alike directly refuted this false narrative. They called out the Trump campaign's lack of evidence for its claims, and the judges did that even in cases where they could have simply thrown out the lawsuit without writing a word. You can see behind me a few excerpts from the decisions in these 62 cases. The Trump campaign's lack of evidence was criticized by judges across the political spectrum. In Pennsylvania, a Trump-appointed judge concluded, quote, "Charges require specific allegations and proof. We have neither here."
I remember that.
Another Trump-appointed judge warned that if cases like these succeeded, quote, "Any disappointed loser in a presidential election able to hire a team of clever lawyers could flag claim deviations from election results and cast doubt on election results."
Wow.
The list goes on and on. Allegations are called, quote, "an amalgamation of theories, conjecture, and speculation." In another, strained legal arguments without merit, unsupported by evidence, derived from wholly unreliable sources, a fundamental and obvious misreading of the Constitution. The rejection of President Trump's litigation efforts was overwhelming. 22 federal judges appointed by Republican presidents, including 10 appointed by President Trump himself, and at least 24 elected or appointed Republican state judges dismissed the president's claims. At least 11 lawyers have been referred for disciplinary proceedings due to bad faith and baseless efforts to undermine the outcome of the 2020 presidential election. Rudy Giuliani had his license to practice law suspended in New York. And just this week, a newly filed complaint will potentially make his suspension from practicing law in D.C. permanent.
Good.
And as we've just heard from perhaps the most preeminent Republican election lawyer in recent history, the Trump campaign's unprecedented effort to overturn its election loss in court was a deeply damaging abuse of the judicial process. As stated by U.S. District Court Judge David Carter, this was, quote, "a coup in search of a legal theory."
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So
I
good.
yield back.
Fucking bring it home.
I want to thank our witnesses for joining us today. The members of the Select Committee may have additional questions for today's witnesses, and we ask that you respond expeditiously in writing to those questions.
Oh, in writing. Damn.
Without objection, members will be permitted 10 business days to submit statements for the record, including opening remarks and additional questions for the witnesses. The second panel of witnesses is now dismissed.
Okay, there we go. We got through. We got through a chat. That was a bit dry as well. I found myself nodding off. But it all amounted to a pretty interesting case. They knew what they were doing was wrong. They had all sorts of people saying, yo, this is bullshit. What you're doing is bullshit. From the top cop to the lemmings who
Without objection, the chair recognizes the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Lofgren, for a closing statement.
Okay. Thank you. Bring it home.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now that we understand the litigation efforts by President Trump and his allies, I'd like to present additional actions taken by the Trump campaign during this time. Okay. President Trump continued to push the stolen election narrative, even though he and his allies knew that their litigation efforts, making the same claim, had failed. It's worth pointing out that litigation generally does not continue past the safe harbor date of December 14th. But the fact that this litigation went on, well, that decision makes more sense when you consider the Trump campaign's fundraising tactics. Because if the litigation had stopped on December 14th, there would have been no fight to defend the election and no clear path to continue to raise millions of dollars. Mr. Chairman, at this time, I'd ask for unanimous consent to include in the record a video presentation describing how President Trump used the lies he told to raise millions of dollars from the American people. These fundraising schemes were also part of the effort to disseminate the false claims of election fraud.
Yeah, I remember coming across
Without objection. So
my name is Amanda Wick, and I'm Senior Investigative Counsel with the House Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol. Between Election Day and January 6th, the Trump campaign sent millions of fundraising emails to Trump supporters, sometimes as many as 25 a day. The
25
emails
a day?
claimed the, quote, left-wing mob was undermining the election, implored supporters to, quote, step up to protect the integrity of the election, and encouraged them to, quote, fight back. But as the Select Committee has demonstrated, the Trump campaign knew these claims of voter fraud were false, yet they continued to barrage small-dollar donors with emails, encouraging them to donate to something called the Official Election Defense Fund.
This is so
the Select Committee discovered no such fund existed.
I don't believe there is actually a fund called the Election Defense Fund.
Is it fair to say that the Election Defense Fund was another, I think we called it a marketing tactic? Yes. Ooh. And tell us about these funds as marketing tactics.
Just a topic matter.
No, it's not.
Where money could potentially go to be, how money could potentially be used.
That's fraud.
The claims that the election was stolen were so successful, President Trump and his allies raised $250 million, nearly $100 million in the first week after the election.
Wait, what?
On November 9th, 2020, President Trump created a separate entity called the Save America PAC. Most of the money raised went to this newly created PAC, not to election-related litigation. The Select Committee discovered that the Save America PAC made millions of dollars of contributions to pro-Trump organizations, including $1 million to Trump Chief of Staff Mark Meadows' charitable foundation, $1 million to the America First Policy Institute, a conservative organization which employs several former Trump administration officials, $204,857 to the Trump Hotel Collection, and over $5 million to Event Strategies, Inc., the company that ran President Trump's January 6th rally on the Ellipse.
All of us here today do not want to see our election victory stolen by emboldened radical left Democrats, which is what they're doing.
The evidence developed by the Select Committee highlights how the Trump campaign aggressively pushed false election claims to fundraise, telling supporters it would be used to fight voter fraud that did not exist. The emails continued through January 6th, even as President Trump spoke on the Ellipse. 30 minutes after the last fundraising email was sent, the Capitol was breached.
30 minutes. Wow, you sending them right up? Oh my goodness. USA, USA, freedom, freedom.
Every American is entitled and encouraged to participate in our electoral process. Political fundraising is part of that. Small dollar donors use scarce disposable income to support candidates and causes of their choosing, to make their voices heard. And those donors deserve the truth about what those funds will be used for. Throughout the committee's investigation, we found evidence that the Trump campaign and its surrogates misled donors as to where their funds would go and what they would be used for. So not only was there the big lie, there was the big ripoff. Donors deserve to know where their funds are really going.
The big con?
They deserve better than what President Trump and his team did.
The big lie and the big con. They're both three-letter words.
Without objection, the chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Wyoming, Ms. Cheney, for a closing statement.
All right.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I would like to thank all of our witnesses today. And I'd also like to, in particular, wish Mr. Stepien and his family all the best on the arrival of a new baby.
Aww.
Today's hearing, Mr. Chairman, was very narrowly focused. And in the coming days, you will see the committee move on to President Trump's broader planning for January 6th, including his plan to corrupt the Department of Justice and his detailed planning with lawyer John Eastman to pressure the Vice President, state legislatures, state officials, and others to overturn the election. Let me leave you today with one clip to preview what you will see in one of our hearings to come. This is the testimony of White House lawyer Eric Hirschman. John Eastman called Mr. Hirschman the day after January 6th, and here is how that conversation went.
I said to him, "Are you out of your effing mind?"
Wow.
Right? I said, I only want to hear two words coming out of your mouth from now on. Orderly transition.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Damn, those are some good
At the conclusion of last week's hearing, we showed you a video of rioters explaining why they had come to Washington on January 6th.
Right.
It was because Donald Trump told them to be here.
He gave them the brainworms.
Today we heard about some of the lies Donald Trump embraced and amplified when it became clear he didn't have the numbers of votes to win the election. We heard about how officials at different levels of government explored claims of fraud and found no evidence. Yet the former president continued to repeat those false claims over and over again. Today, we'll end things where we did on Thursday, back on January 6th, hearing words of individuals who wanted to stop the transfer of power. We know they were there because of Donald Trump. Now we hear some of the things they believed. Without objection, I enter into the record a video presentation.
All right.
I know exactly what's going on right now. Fake election. They think they're gonna fucking cheat us out of our vote and put communist fucking Biden in office. It ain't fucking happening today, buddy.
Whoa.
You voted?
Yes, sir.
How'd it go?
Voted early. It went well, except for the can't really trust the software. Dominion software all over it.
Oh my
We
gosh.
voted, and right in the top right-hand corner of the Dominion voting machine that we used, there was a Wi-Fi symbol with 5 bars. So that most definitely connected to the internet, without a doubt. So they stole that from us twice. We're not doing it anymore. We're not taking it anymore. So we're standing up, we're here, and whatever happens, we're not laying down again.
I'm from Pennsylvania. It didn't work. It absolutely worked. It didn't work. No. Trust the system. 200,000 people that weren't even registered voted.
Whoa, the specific claims.
430,000 votes disappeared from President Trump's tally, and you can't stand there and tell me that it worked.
I don't want to say that what we're doing is right. But if the election's being stolen, what is it going to take?
Wow, what a moron.
The chair requests those in the hearing room remain seated until the Capitol Police have escorted members from the room.
Oh, boy.
Without objection, the committee stands adjourned.
We did it. We did it, Chad. We got through the entire thing. Holy cow. Can you believe it? Wow. Golly gee. I was long, but it was interesting, especially that last clip. What'd you think? My goodness. The next one is Wednesday at 10 a.m. I know, it's very lawyery and long. It was kind of lawyery and long. I was watching other people on Twitter, and they're just like taking the little clips. I'm like, yeah, that's a good idea. I should just do that instead. I desperately need to eat and stretch and drink water and see the sun and touch grass and do things. But yeah, thanks for hanging out. Appreciate you. I put in updates for emotes, but Twitch has to verify them, apparently. So, soon, and I'm trying to fix the channel points. They should work eventually. We'll do something fun with channel points, although most people ignore that shit. I don't know, it's not that exciting. And so the next stream will be Thursday morning. We'll catch up on the January 6th committee from Wednesday, see if anything exciting happened, and after like a day, this whole week, it's going to be January 6th coverage. I'm feeling, there's going to be reactions to it, and then getting prepared for the next hearing and unpacking this lawyer stuff, which usually just boils down to very simple, specific things. Like, the reason it took so long was to be like, it's one thing for one person to say, yeah, I thought his claims were bullshit. And it's another thing for them to say, I had this conversation in this room at this hour about this, and he said that. And it's like, okay, that's evidence we can enter into the public. We can refer back to it in the same way. We learned that Rudy Giuliani, of course, was drunk, and we're starting to wonder where this theory came from. Yeah, there was a lot of good stuff in that. That roll of quotes from the judges was pretty fantastic. So it's getting spicier and spicier. I'm hoping to see some right-wingers mauled and cope and seethe, which should be fun as well. Otherwise, I'll see you later. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. Au revoir, à la prochaine. Bye-bye. I'll see you Thursday. And I'll have a cool concert to tell you about that I'm sure is going to be magical and fantastic. All right. Y'all